Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I remember the call coming in just after 2:47 a.m., the radio crackling with static before the dispatcher's voice cut through it. Hang-up call from Pine Ridge Road, Unit 7, respond. I shoved my coffee aside, cold and bitter, and eased out of the bay. The night air hit me like a wall of damp wool. Mist clung to my uniform, matting my hair against my skull. Pine Ridge was one of those dead-end streets where even the street lamps seemed too tired to burn. Lawns grew wild against the curbs, and every house sat behind hedges that cast deep shadows. By the time I turned onto Pine Ridge, the sky was so dark it felt like a weight pressing down on the cruiser. My headlights cut through the fog in two weak beams that vanished half a block ahead. I slowed to 10 miles an hour. Radio muted, except for the hum of the engine and the distant whine of cicadas. The dispatcher confirmed the location. 18 Pine Ridge, a squat ranch-style house with peeling white paint and a sagging front porch. No paperwork on file. No previous calls except for a false alarm last spring. I parked under the lone street lamp, its bulb sputtering like a dying breath. I sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, listening for anything other than the engine and my own breath. Nothing. I flicked the radio back on. Dispatch, I'm on scene, setting up a perimeter. My voice sounded too loud in the small cab. I reached for my flashlight and sidearm but didn't holster the weapon. Not that I expected a gunfight. It was the silence that unnerved me. The yard was knee-deep in grass. Muddy footprints led from the driveway to the porch. They were thin, almost delicate, like someone had stepped lightly in socks. I crouched to inspect them by flashlight and saw they ended at the edge of the sagging step, then reappeared halfway up the porch. It was as if whoever made them had crouched, slid their feet along the wood, then climbed inside. No boot treads, no bare toes, just impressions in the damp wood. I swallowed, chest tightening, and pushed up the porch's loose board. Beneath it was a dark cavity, but nothing inside except twisted bits of wire and an old envelope addressed to someone named Marguerite Owen. I called out, "Mrs. Owen, this is Officer Reynolds. You okay in there?" My voice echoed against the brick facade. No answer. The front door stood slightly ajar. The lock was snapped, not forced, as though it had been left unlocked or opened from the inside. I swept my flashlight across the threshold. The low hum of the refrigerator, a ceiling fan barely moving, and the faint glow of a television left on mute. Dust motes floated in the beam, like tiny ghosts dancing in the air. I stepped in, boots silent on threadbare carpet. The living room smelled of stale tobacco and something sour, like spoiled milk. The television flickered images of static, a frozen hallway of white-gray noise. I scanned the couch, nothing but a half-empty mug on the armrest, lipstick stained around the rim. Photographs lined the mantel. A younger Marguerite smiling next to a man in a naval uniform. Two children on a beach, squinting into sunlight that the television now swallowed. As I moved toward the kitchen, the floor creaked behind me. A soft click, as if someone had shifted their weight. I froze, flashlight trained on the dark entry to the hallway. My pulse hammered in my ears. I called out again, voice low. "Mrs. Owen?" Silence. Then, faint at first, I heard it. The soft scrape of fingernails against skin, like someone dragging their hand along the wall. It came from the hallway, from the room at the end where the freezing drafts danced under its door. I edged forward, stepping lightly, every nerve screaming. My flashlight beam landed on a small table under a portrait of her family. There, the phone. Landline, cord coiled neatly, receiver off the hook. The screen of the small digital clock beside it read 2:48 a.m. The handset lay face down. The cord stretched taut into the next room. I reached for it. The instant my fingers brushed the plastic, I heard breathing in my ear, slow, deliberate, ragged, like someone hiding just behind me, too close. I spun around, training my light on the far wall, but saw nothing but a row of empty coat hooks. I told myself it was Mrs. Owen, confused or frightened. I called her name, louder this time, voice cracking. "Marguerite, it's okay, I'm here to help." No reply, only that breathing, inching closer, and then silence. The static on the TV flickered once more. I should have called for backup, but something stopped me. Some part of me that believed I'd scare her if anyone else came. I eased toward the hallway, each step measured. The walls were covered in faded floral wallpaper, opening into the children's bedroom first. The door was closed. I tried the knob, locked. Inside, I imagined chairs turned over, toys strewn like clues. I shook the knob, it clicked. I opened it. Half a dozen dolls lined the windowsill, their glass eyes reflecting my flashlight like cold morning dew. One doll lay on the floor, arms splayed, looking as if it had been thrown. I leaned closer and noticed wet footprints around its body, darker than the rest, like someone had stepped in water, then pressed their feet down around its porcelain face. I swallowed. I left the bedroom and moved on. The next door was the bathroom, light off, tiles gleaming wet, faucet dripping. I flicked the light, the room flooded with yellow glare. Muddy footprints led in, stopped at the tub. I looked down. Inside the tub, water pooled with ripples, though no one was there. I knelt, peered over the edge, and saw the words etched into the porcelain in jagged script. "Help me." Not written in ink or paint, but scratched so deep it looked like bone had been carved. My radio burst to life. "Unit 7, dispatch. You still with us?" I didn't answer right away. I studied the scratches, half expecting them to shift under my stare. When I finally spoke, my voice was low. I'm in the bathroom, found something." I paused, then added more firmly, requesting backup. Possible intruder inside. Before I could put out the call, I heard it again, the soft scuff of footsteps above me. The ceiling fan hummed as the attic vent shook slightly. Then a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Officer, don't go." I froze, hand on the doorframe. The whisper came again, barely audible. "Help me." Everything went still. The faucet drip stopped. The hallway beyond fell into darkness. I held my breath, waiting for something to move, something to appear. But there was only silence, and that question echoing in my head. Who had called, and why was a voice begging for help from behind a locked attic hatch? The moment dispatch acknowledged my backup request, the hallway hinges behind me creaked. A soft, deliberate sound, like a knuckle tapping a doorframe. I didn't dare turn. Instead, I took another breath and edged forward, flashlight beam grazing the peeling wallpaper. The air smelled colder here, seasoned with mildew and something metallic too faint to name. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though gravity had thickened. Ahead, the hallway opened into what must have been the master bedroom. The door hung at a crooked angle, its paint chipped away in ragged strips. I eased inside. The room was empty except for a bed pushed against the far wall, sheets bunched and stained, as if someone had bolted upright in terror. the only light came from a single, flickering lamp beside an old wooden dresser. Its bulb flashed on and off in an uneven rhythm, becoming brighter, then dimmer, casting the dresser's mirror in shifting angles of shadow. In its reflection, I saw the footprint impressions again, this time pressed into the dusty floorboards at the foot of the bed, leading toward a window cracked just enough to let in a sliver of moonlight. I crossed the room, boots silent on the threadbare rug. The glass in the window was cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and beyond it lay the overgrown backyard where the fog swirled in milky eddies around a rotting swing set. I shone my light outside. The swing's chains creaked, moving as if pulled by an unseen hand, though the air was still. I shivered, then refocused on the window. Along the sill, muddy handprints streaked sideways, dozens of them, like someone had climbed in feet first, then dragged their hands to steady themselves. The marks trailed across the pane and vanished into the glass, leaving behind tiny cracks that spread outward like veins. I turned from the window as the lamp behind me flickered out, plunging the room into near total darkness. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I swept it across the bed. There, tucked under the pillow, lay her diary. Pages curled at the edges, cover creased. I braced one hand against the mattress and picked it up. The last entry was scrawled in bold, looping letters. I heard him calling. My children did not wake. Please, someone come. The words were smudged with something wet. Tears or sweat, I couldn't tell. My radio crackled again, though the sound came distant, as though filtered through water. Unit 7, dispatch. Backup ETA 2 minutes, over. I didn't reply. Instead, I fumbled the diary into my jacket pocket and moved toward the closet door at the far corner. My flashlight beam hit the closet again, but this time its door was closed, though I was certain it had been open moments ago. I halted. My heart pounded in my throat, each beat a nail driven into my chest. Slowly, I approached. The door handle turned under my light. A slow, deliberate rotation that defied physics if no one stood on the other side. I placed my hand on the knob. It was ice cold. I called out, voice lower than a whisper, "It's okay. Please show yourself." The door creaked open. Inside, I found nothing but darkness and the soft drip of water. I swept my beam inside. No chair, no footprints, only hanging garments swaying gently, as if someone had stuffed them hastily and left. Then, at the back of the closet, the beam caught something glinting. A small, cracked photograph wedged between the boards. I pried it free. It showed a family, 4 figures smiling at the camera on a sunny lawn. Marguerite stood in a floral dress, arms around 2 children, her husband beside her. But someone had scratched their faces away, carving ragged gouges through the emulsion, until all that remained were blank shapes. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in the same shaky hand as the diary, were 2 words, "Welcome home." A sudden thump above me jolted my blood cold. My flashlight beam jerked upward to the ceiling vent. The grill rattled as though someone pounded from above, soft yet insistent, rhythmic tapping, like knuckles drumming a plea. I stepped back, stomach lurching, and pressed my palm flat against the closet door. The knocks paused the instant my hand touched the wood. I stood, frozen. The beam on my flashlight tilted of its own accord, sweeping the floor until it settled on another set of footprints. Bare toes this time, trailing from the closet into the bedroom, and continuing past the bed toward the ensuite doorway where the bathroom lay. My breath caught. The scratch on the tub had said, "Help me." Here, the footprint said, "Please." But please what? Please come, please stop. I backed out of the bedroom, every nerve screaming, and retraced my steps down the hall. The din of cicadas outside had fallen silent, replaced by the low hum of the refrigerator and that whisper of ventilation above. The pad of feet behind me matched my pace. Slow, patient, always just out of sight. I could almost feel the presence like a cold breath at my neck. Reaching the landing by the stairs, I paused. My backup would be here any moment. I whispered into the radio, "Backup. You need to check the crawl space and attic. Something's up there. Something's been living in this house." As I spoke, the static on the radio jumped erratically, then cut out entirely. The hall light overhead wavered and died. I flicked my flashlight to its highest beam and stepped toward the staircase. Behind me, the floorboards creaked once more, an echoing cough in the stillness. The attic pull-down ladder hung flush against the ceiling, its latch loose as if someone had toyed with it. I reached for the release, fingers brushing the cool metal. The ladder swung down with a groan, each rung swaying under its own weight. I hesitated only a moment before grabbing the first rung. The wood felt slick beneath my gloves. I climbed, each rung raising my chest tighter against the beam overhead. At the top, I paused, flashlight aimed at the attic floor. The boards above were dark, but I could make out the slope of the roof and daylight leaking around a warped panel. I looked down the ladder, down onto the hardwood hall where I'd started. Too far to jump, too high to think clearly. The temperature dropped sharply, frost creeping along my collar. I shone the light around. Nothing but crates of old clothes, cardboard boxes sealed with brittle tape, and furniture draped in sheets. Then, across the far rafters, I saw it, scrawled in thick dark lines across the insulation. Words that sent my pulse racing. "I'm still here." The beam flickered, and for an instant I thought I saw movement. Something slipping behind a stack of boxes. I reached toward the flashlight's button but froze as the attic hatch above me slammed shut with a thunderous boom. The ladder rattled, threatening to collapse. The whisper came again, loud enough to reverberate through my skull. "Officer, why didn't you answer?" My heart hammered. The question echoed the one I'd never managed to ask. Why had I ignored her calls? Before I could push the ladder back down, the attic light blinked on, cold, bluish, and illuminated a pair of footprints leading away into the deeper darkness. I swallowed hard, voice cracking, as I radioed for immediate extraction. But the radio wouldn't transmit. The frequency was dead, swallowed by the house itself. I stood on the ladder, caught between the darkness above and the suffocating silence below. And just before the light cut out again, I heard her voice one last time, calm and hollow. "I've been waiting." I tightened my grip on the attic ladder, every muscle trembling as the darkness beyond the hatch seems to pulse with intent. My flashlight beam sweeps the rafters again, and I swear the scrawled words have shifted, as though someone, or something, had erased and rewritten them while I wasn't looking. Below me, the floorboards of the hallway groan under their own weight, the silence so absolute it presses against my eardrums. I force myself to climb higher, each rung a reminder that turning back means abandoning whoever, or whatever, is up here. The air grows colder still, turning my breath into shards of ice that sparkle in the narrow beam. The boxes and crates littering the attic are coated with dust so thick it tastes like decay on my tongue when I inhale. I pause at the apex of the ladder, directly beneath the warped panel letting in the faintest silver sliver of moonlight. It's there I see it. A small, battered suitcase, its leather cracked and stained, sitting alone atop a stack of rotting floorboards. The latch hangs open, inviting, as if someone laid out their valuables for me to inspect. Against every instinct screaming to drop back down, I hoist the suitcase down onto the ladder rung beside me. The weight surprises me, It's heavier than it looks. I glance at the far wall and notice footprints again, traced in dusty chalk rather than mud, curling across the boards toward me. Dispatch? I whisper into the darkness, thumb hovering over the radio button. Please respond. But only silence answers. The attic air tightens as though I'm breathing through a wet cloth. I force open the suitcase, praying for a flashlight battery or a radio mic. Anything that explains the presence of this thing in Mrs. Owen's home. Instead, I find a collection of family photographs, identical to the one I discovered in the closet, faces scratched away in brutal arcs, and beneath them, a single page torn from a calendar, August 15th, 2012, circled in deep red ink. Underneath, scrawled hastily, "She never left." My heart hammers so hard I expect the beam to shake free. I slam the suitcase closed and set it aside, fingers slick with sweat or something else. I force myself to look back at the hatch. Something moves there, a flicker of shadow just beyond the rim. I drop the ladder rungs quickly, my badge scraping against the wood as I descend until I land on the final rung and swing my boots onto the attic floor. The attic hatch slams shut behind me, the finality of it reverberating through my chest. I turn toward the main attic space, where the flashlight catches the edge of a wooden box I hadn't noticed before. Its lid is ajar. Inside, rows of small, glassine envelopes, each labeled with a date and a name. I lift one to the light. June 3rd, 2008, Evelyn Harper. I drop it as though it's burned me, but the others jostle noisily as the box shifts, drawing my eye back to the ceiling vent. The knocks begin again, slow and deliberate, as if urging me to move deeper into the attic. I swallow hard, voice tight and low. Marguerite. The name feels wrong on my tongue now, choked with dread. My flashlight beam flickers across the far rafters and lands on a shape draped in cloth, an outline of a body, motionless. I force my breath into calm, inch toward it, every step a battle against the cold creeping into my bones. Then, in the low hum of the attic's stale air, I hear a whisper behind me. "You found my suitcases. Now you'll stay." I spin, flashlight carving the attic into white and black, but I see no one. The shape in the cloth remains still. My knees buckle. I grip the rafter and drag myself upright, whispering into the dark, "I'm getting you out of here." A sudden scuttle from the box of envelopes sends them tumbling to the floor, and as they spill, I see each one bears Mrs. Owen's address, and every date corresponds to a hang-up call the dispatch logs never recorded. I back toward the hatch, stepping over the envelopes and yanked at the latch. The hatch won't budge. I hammer on it with my fists. Below, the hallway light flickers on for the first time since it died. I hear the distant shout of another officer. Backup finally arrived, but his voice is muffled, swallowed by walls. I pound again, louder, and something skitters across the attic floor toward me. In the beam's glow, I glimpse a hand, pale, slender, eyes fixed on mine from beneath the hanging sheet. My radio crackles to life. "Unit 7, are you okay?" I choke out a single word. "No." Silence returns. The attic is empty except for the cloth-covered shape and the rattling box of envelopes. Then, in a soft, breathless whisper that seems to come from inside my own skull, I hear, "Stay with me." I realize, with a gut punch of horror, that I've been calling Mrs. Owen, and hearing the echo of her voice in places only she could have reached, because she never left. And now, neither will I. I could feel the attic shifting beneath my weight as the temperature plummeted. My breath fogged the narrow beam of my flashlight, and every exhalation sounded like a ragged whisper in the tight space. The shape beneath the sheet stirred again. A slow slide, as if whatever was beneath wanted to reveal itself, but held back by ancient fear. I swallowed, voice parched, and forced my legs to move toward it, boots scraping against splintered boards that threatened to give way under their own age. The envelopes lay scattered around me, each one bearing a hand-scrawled date and name, like a tally of disappearances the dispatch never acknowledged. My eyes flicked from one to the next. June 3rd, 2008. Evelyn Harper. September 12th, 2009. Doris Caldwell. February 7th, 2010. Rita Marshall. Names I didn't recognize, but each date corresponded to a missing persons bulletin I'd never seen. Someone had been documenting lives erased, one at a time, in this house, and I had just become the latest entry. A weight settled in my gut. Whoever, or whatever, lived here had extended an invitation, not to help, but to consume. I gripped the flashlight tighter, the smooth metal slick beneath my gloves, and forced myself to lean closer to the sheet-draped form. My light trembled, and the flickering beam revealed a small folding chair set against the far wall, its seat stained dark. It was empty, but the chair's legs sat in a perfect circle of chalk footprints, as if someone had danced around it, waiting for the show to begin. I glanced back at the hatch. It was sealed tight, the latch unyielding as though painted shut. Panic fluttered in my chest. You couldn't climb out if the hatch refused to open, but I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the suitcase I'd left by the ladder. The date written in red on its torn calendar page had stayed with me. August 15th, 2012. The same date on which Mrs. Owen's heartbeat vanished from the logs. The same date on which I'd first heard her whispered pleas. She had been here all along, watching me, guiding me until I understood her truth. She was trapped, too. I forced my gaze back to the draped shape. The cloth rippled, and I saw beneath it a bulky form, an outline too large for a woman of Mrs. Owen's slender frame. My pulse thundered. I thought of the rifle packed in my cruiser, of calling out a warning, but the silence pressed me into stillness. There was no rational choice left, only the slow draw of compassion and horror mixing into adrenaline that braced my limbs. "Marguerite," I whispered, voice cracking as though squeezed through broken glass. "I'm here, I'm listening." The cloth shifted again, tighter this time, molding to the shape beneath. Then, as if in response, the entire attic seemed to inhale. The crates rattled. The boxes groaned open, spilling their contents. Handwritten journals, more photographs. A child's rag doll with a single glass eye. The static from my dead radio buzzed lightly in my ear, and I realized the frequency wasn't dead, it was waiting, dormant, echoing my own heartbeat. The hush settled heavy, and I felt it, a presence moving to stand before me. My flashlight wavered until its beam fell on a pair of polished shoes, almost too tiny to be real, resting on the dusty floor. The legs above them were clad in children's nightclothes, pale and trembling. I forced myself to step forward, kneeling and swinging my light upward. There, at the edge of its glow, hovered a little girl's face. Eyes wide, unblinking, shimmering wet in the gloom. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Her hand lifted, pointing behind me. I turned, leathery skin prickling across my neck, and shone the light toward the far rafters. The box of envelopes lay open, and in the space above it, a small skeleton doll dangled from a nail, its limbs jointed awkwardly. It swung as though stirred by wind that didn't exist. The attic vent above rattled once more, slow taps that beckoned me to the hatch. My radio finally keyed as the muffled voice of Officer Grant filtered up. "Unit 7, we're breaching the front door. Something's wrong. Respond." But the voice was distant, like music heard underwater. I realized with a jolt that the walls had shifted, the attic growing tighter, more oppressive, as if the house were breathing around me. The wooden beams groaned in sympathy, and the little girl's face pressed closer to the beam, her eyes reflecting my own terror. The doll's glass eye caught the light, sliding into focus. Under its cracked, childlike veneer, I saw depthless black, an emptiness that pulled at my soul. The outline blurred, and I heard a whisper that filled every corner of the attic, a chorus of fragile voices speaking at once. "Help me. Please stay. Don't leave." My stomach turned. I scrambled backward, boot heel slipping on a loose board. The suitcase tumbled from its perch, bursting open to scatter the photographs and envelopes like falling petals. In the sudden blast of motion, the air grew thick with whispers. Mrs. Owen's voice, the child's voice, 100 voices begging, weaving together in an impossible tapestry of sorrow and rage. I jammed my shoulder against the hatch. It groaned and flexed as though alive, resisting my strength. The whispers crescendoed into a single plea that hammered through my mind. Stay. My hand slid down to the flashlight's tail cap, and in one desperate motion I disengaged the beam, plunging the attic into absolute darkness. The hush was immediate and total. I pressed my ear to the hatch, fingertips searching for the latch. I found it, cold and smooth, and yanked with every ounce of will I had left. The hatch swung open with a howl of wind, as if the house exhaled, the attic space behind me swallowing its ghosts in a rush of stale air. I tumbled onto the ladder, flashlight out of batteries or perhaps shattered by my own fear. My hands fumbled down the rungs, knees burning, until I hit the bottom step and dropped into the hallway. The door to the stairs lay wide open, illuminated by the flickering hallway light. I ran, stumbling down toward my cruiser where backup had just arrived. The front door burst inward behind me, and I didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, I saw the house standing silent, unassuming, paint peeled, windows dark, as though nothing had ever happened. But when I turned down the road, I could still hear faint whispers in the wind that rattled the trees. I'm still here. And I knew, without doubt, that it was not Mrs. Owen alone, but every victim whose voice had been silenced in those walls, every name erased from the records, every plea that faded into the dark. They were waiting. And so was I, marked forever by the echoes of calls that could never be answered. The road, out of Pine Ridge Road, blurred under my tires as dawn threatened the horizon, pale light seeping through the fog like spilled milk. My heart hammered against rib and bone, and sweat, or cold fear, slicked my uniform beneath my vest. Behind me, the house at 18 Pine Ridge sat silent, its sagging porch and dark windows offering no hint of the horror within. I didn't stop at the station. Instead, I drove straight to the dispatch center, parking so hard the cruiser shuddered. I barreled inside, eyes rimmed with red, and found Dispatcher Mills hunched over her console. She looked up at my pace, confusion flickering in her stare. "Marguerite Owen," I blurted, voice raw as stone. "She's still there." Mills pressed her hand to her mouth. "She's been gone since—" "I know," I cut in, "but she's here, and there are more." I let her lead me back to the consoles, where the logs flickered on screens. I pointed at the files, calls never recorded, names buried beneath dead air. I rattled off dates and matching missing persons reports. Doris Caldwell, Evelyn Harper, Rita Marshall, now Mrs. Owen. Each name rose again in my mouth like a curse. Mills's fingers flew across the keyboard. Unit 7 said house sealed, hen, no footprints, no evidence. How? "I don't know," I whispered. "The attic? They trap you." Before she could respond, my radio buzzed. Officer Reynolds, Unit 9 on scene. House is secure, no one found. I swallowed against a dry throat. Unit 9, I repeated. Check behind the walls. There are crawl spaces under the loo, under the tub, and a sealed panel in the attic. Mill's forehead creased. On it. I stepped back, chest tight, mind racing. The cold dread that had blanketed me in that attic tightened its grip. Questions piled up. Who had built these hiding places? Why hoard photographs and calendars? And most urgent, what had happened to Marguerite Owen and the others inside those walls? I needed evidence, proof to save anyone else from the same fate. I grabbed my phone and tapped out a message. Get me forensic, CSI, K9, anyone. We're reopening the file. Outside, the first orange light of sunrise broke the mist. It painted the building's facade ghastly, lengthening its shadows. I remembered Marguerite's diary entry. I heard him calling. My children did not wake, and felt a stab of guilt. In my duty to protect, I had been too slow, too cautious. I had let her calls go unanswered until it became too late. Dispatch rang again. Officer, sir, Unit 9 found something. I dashed for the door, adrenaline spiking. I slid into my cruiser and back down Pine Ridge, spotlight illuminating the overgrown lawn. Unit 9's lights flickered against the peeling siding. I sprinted up the porch steps. There, flashlights bobbing, were Detective Kim and a CSI tech. They knelt by a loose floor tile in the bathroom, prying it up with a crowbar. Thought you'd want to see this, Kim said, voice low. Under the tile was a narrow cavity 2 inches deep, lined with old photographs, faces intact, smiles frozen, stacked neatly in plastic sleeves. I knelt beside them, heart pounding. The pictures showed ordinary moments. A girl's first bike ride, a birthday cake, a Christmas morning tree. None bore scratches. I picked one out, a color shot of a 10-year-old girl named Sarah Jenkins, wobbling on training wheels. Date on the back, August 15th, 2005. My stomach lurched. I'd read about Sarah's disappearance. Case closed for lack of evidence. Here she was, long forgotten, preserved like a trophy. I found more under the tub, the CSI said, face pale. He opened the hollow below the faucet, revealing small envelopes exactly like the ones in the attic box, dates and names. He handed me one labeled June 9th, 2007. Daniel Reeves. My breath caught. Daniel had vanished after his parents reported nothing but a half-eaten breakfast. No footprints, no notes, no calls, just a missing boy. A soft whine behind me made me spin. Kim stood at the doorway to the hallway, her flashlight beam catching on something smeared high on the wall. Red stains, dried and cracked, outlining the shape of a child's palm. The CSI snapped a photo. Blood, he said quietly. You want to see the mail slot? I followed him into the living room, past the console TV still stuck on static. Beneath the slot, unnoticed until then, was a stack of mail. Every envelope addressed to Mrs. Owen, unopened. Dusty years of bills, letters, postcards. I flipped through them, mylar-lined postcards from Florida, handwritten letters from her sister, a postcard from Paris dated 1999, each touched by the same oversight that let a woman vanish into her own home. The CSI crouched at the fireplace hearth, prying at a brick. It came loose, revealing a hollow behind it. A child's dress hung on a hook, faded but intact. I leaned closer. The dress was damp, stiff with age, and beneath it, scrawled into the mortar, the words, "They never listen." My hands shook. Outside, sirens wailed as more units arrived. Forensics spread out white tarps, evidence markers dotting the floor. I stepped back, chest heaving, and let the magnitude settle. A network of secret spaces, each hiding a piece of someone's life stolen in plain sight, and all because no one had listened to the calls. A voice crackled from my radio, my own name. I answered. "Unit 7, what's your 10-4?" I stared at the fireplace, fingertips brushing the jagged edge of mortar. My voice trembled as I replied, "Dispatch, I'm at the scene, and I've got a question the house won't answer." I leaned against the cold brick of the fireplace, the words, "They never listen," echoing through my mind as if carved into my skull. The house itself felt alive, its walls pulsing with unspoken secrets. I wiped sweat from my brow, even though the temperature in the room was barely above freezing, and steadied my breathing. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the muffled shuffle of forensic technicians at work. Then, a dull thud came from behind the living room wall. It was soft, rhythmic, deliberate, too deliberate to be settling boards. I spun, flashlight sweeping the room, and noticed a small air vent near the ceiling, its grill slightly ajar. Through the slats, a faint light flickered, as if someone had left a bulb burning somewhere in the darkness beyond. My pulse quickened. Whoever had built these secret spaces had a vantage point, watching every movement, listening to every breath. Without thinking, I grabbed my crowbar from the CSE's toolkit and wedged it into the vent's edge. The grill flew free with a metallic ping, revealing a dark cavity about a foot deep, enough room for a crawling figure. I could see the edges of yellowed wallpaper curling inside, patterns that matched the hallway below. A cold draft drifted through, carrying with it a soft, metallic odor. I knelt and pressed my ear to the opening. At first, nothing but distant radio chatter. Then, unmistakable, the scrape of knuckles against wood. I swallowed hard, voice low into my radio mic. "Unit 7, this is Reynolds. There's a crawl space here. I need fiber optic camera." "On it," came the reply, clipped and professional. I held my crowbar at the ready and shone my flashlight beam into the crawl space. My light trembled, revealing a patchwork of old telephone wires and electrical conduits. A thin layer of dust covered everything, except for a small patch in the center where footsteps had wiped it away. Those bare toes had been here too. The forensic tech arrived, hand cradling a slender cable attached to a miniature camera. He fed it into the vent, guiding it with precision. On the small monitor, we watched live footage. A narrow tunnel of plaster and lath, cobwebs drifting in the beam. Then, further in, something moved, a pale hand, curled fingers pressing into the dusty floor. The camera edged closer. The hand flexed, then retracted, pulling back into the darkness. We held our breath. Another flash of movement, the hem of a dress brushing the tunnel's side. The camera caught it. Coarse fabric, faded floral print identical to the children's dress in the fireplace nook. Then the image cut to black as the camera was jerked. Pull it back," I hissed, and the tech reeled it out. On the lens, smeared in dust and something darker, was a message carved into the wood. "Please don't forget." My skin crawled. Forget what? Their names? Their pleas? Or that we had once heard the calls and done nothing? I stood, wiping my gloved hand on my vest. My radio crackled. "Reynolds, CSI has samples from the crawl space. They'll process overnight. We're bringing in structural to map hidden walls and voids. Officer Grant found another hatch in the guest room closet." "Copy that," I replied, voice steadier than I felt. "I'm heading there now." I moved through the living room, past the mail slot, and into the narrow hallway. The guest room door was closed. I pressed my shoulder against it. The knob rattled, then turned freely, no lock. I opened it to reveal an austere room. Twin beds with metal frames, sheets neatly folded at the foot. a small desk under the window. The air smelled of stale linen and something faintly floral, like perfume long since evaporated. Grant knelt by the closet, prying at a triangular panel set low on the wall. He glanced up. Found a utility crawl here, a small opening behind this panel. He tapped the wall. It sounded hollow. I shone my light on the panel and saw its edges worn smooth, as though someone had used it often. The latch was old, but it gave way under Grant's tool. The panel swung open to reveal another narrow passage, illuminated by the beam of my flashlight, barely wide enough for an adult to shuffle through. Pipes and wires ran overhead. At the far end lay a heap of clothing, a mother's coat draped over what looked like a small mattress. I stepped in, boots crunching broken plaster, and shone my light on the mound. Beneath the coat, I glimpsed the curve of a femur, bleached white, protruding from the blanket. I stifled a gasp. Grant ducked in beside me, his expression pale. "Bones," he said quietly. "Human." My stomach twisted. I scanned the crawlspace walls, more photographs tacked up, faces scratched clean. There were dozens of them here, but only empty frames, like ghosts peering through the plaster. I knelt and lifted the coat. It smelled of dust and decay. Beneath, a scattering of colored buttons from children's clothes. I scooped one up, a small pink button shaped like a heart, its paint chipped. It reminded me of Sarah Jenkins's doll's glass eye. I slid out of the crawl, heart pounding. The hallway light flickered overhead, then steadied. The walls felt closer now, as if the house itself leaned in to hear. I closed the panel and pressed it flush. As I stood, I noticed scrawled in the margin of the wallpaper, barely legible in the dull glow, "Never leave us alone again." A chill ran down my spine. I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling for vibrations. The house pulsed with them, like a living being. I realized the house had collected these stories, these voices, and refused to let them be erased. Sirens wailed closer. The faint shape of a fire engine appeared through the front window. I exhaled, letting the sound ground me back in reality. But as I looked down the hallway, I saw a shadow detach itself from the guest room door. Tall, slender, indistinct. It drifted toward me, slower than any living walk. I took a step forward, hand on my holster, but the shadow paused, then seemed to dissolve into the wall. The wood grain flickered briefly, like static on a screen, then settled. I swallowed, mouth dry, and radioed. "Grant, secure the crawl space. I'm checking the attic again, with a team this time." He responded, his voice steady. "Roger that." I moved back through the hallway toward the stairs, mind racing with names and dates, pleas and warnings. The house had one final lesson. Listening wasn't enough. We had to remember. And I knew that even if we shut down every crawl space, every hidden panel, the real work would be uncovering the truth of every vanished voice. I reached the attic pull-down ladder in the hallway and paused. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The house behind me groaned softly, acknowledging my resolve. I set my jaw and hooked the ladder, letting it drop into place. This time, I wouldn't go up alone. As I climbed, I whispered their names under my breath. Evelyn, Doris, Rita, Sarah, Daniel, and Marguerite. Each one a promise that I would not leave them here in silence. And when I reached the attic hatch, I pressed my shoulder against it and pushed open the final barrier between the living and the lost. The hatch swung wide, revealing the cavernous darkness beyond. My team's flashlights beckoned like stars, guiding me forward. Together, we stepped into the attic's chilled air, ready to face every secret it held. And as we advanced, the house settled behind us, its walls echoing with quiet gratitude. Because finally, someone had come to listen. and now they would never be forgotten. I remember the night started like so many others. The radio chatter was low, the roads wet from an afternoon thunderstorm, and that familiar knot of dread didn't hit me until the call came through. 911, hang up at 312 Cedar Street, the dispatcher said, voice steady but distant, like she'd grown numb to these by now. Cedar Street was nothing special, lined with modest homes, trimmed lawns, the occasional dog barking at passing headlights. But when the line went dead, that silence cut deeper than any shout. I eased the cruiser to a stop in front of number 312. The porch light was out. Ordinary houses keep those on for safety. I killed the engine, slipped on my rain-spattered uniform coat, and grabbed my flashlight. My partner, Green, rolled down his window. He'd only been on the force a year, but he trusted me enough not to question my tense nod. Open line, I told him. No breathing, no hiss of static, just nothing. I crossed the lawn, each step soggy with fallen leaves. The front door was dark, no chink of light beneath it. I rapped the doorframe twice. No answer. Leaning in, I pointed my flashlight at the glass panel beside the door, smudged, streaked with rain. Edgewood PD, I called, voice low. You okay in there? Silence. My breath caught when I heard it at last. A faint scrape, like fingers dragging across wood, coming from deeper inside. I keyed the mic on my vest. Dispatch, I need backup, possible caller inside. The click of the mic sounded too loud. I pushed inward. The door creaked, the hinges whining as if agreeing to let me in. My flashlight beam swung over a small entryway, bulletin board, pinned with school notices, a ceramic dish for keys, a scattering of dried petals from someone's attempt at decoration. Nothing moved, until the beam landed on the wall across from me. A single shoe print, muddy and fresh, pressed into the welcome mat, yet no other prints leading away. The mat was too worn to hold new impressions, but the ridge of soil was crisp as though someone had stomped there just seconds before. I swallowed. Green, I whispered, cover the rear door. He disappeared down the hallway. I inched forward, flashlight flicking. The living room couch faced away from us. A low bookshelf held half-empty picture frames, family snapshots blurred into gloom. I stepped over the threshold and paused by the window, curtains drawn tight. Outside, the street was gray shapes and glinting rain, no sign of life. Then came that sound, breathing. Low, irregular, coming from the hallway behind the kitchen. My hand went to my holster, though I didn't draw. My orders were clear: investigate, gather information, and wait for backup if danger seemed likely. But danger had already begun. I edged toward the dark corridor. The wood floor creaked under my weight, a betrayal. "Police!" I barked, voice hollow. "Show yourself." Nothing but the hum of a refrigerator from the kitchen. By now, Green was beside me, his flashlight cutting a narrow path through the gloom. "I don't see anyone," he muttered, voice tense. We moved together toward the kitchen door, passing a side table where a single white sneaker lay on its side, pristine despite the rain. I paused. Why leave just one shoe? No coat draped over the banister, no purse on the table, no sign that anyone had fetched help. Just that shoe, alone, as though set out deliberately. My gut twisted. I signaled Green to check the backyard door, which swung slightly, the chain lock undone from the inside. Outside, footprints marred the muddy grass, heading toward the neighbor's fence. They stopped abruptly where the grass met concrete steps. No prints on the pavement. Whoever had walked those steps had vanished at the threshold. I radioed dispatch. "Evidence of entry and exit." No suspect in sight. Line still open but silent. The dispatcher acknowledged with her clipped tone. I hated that tone. It made every case feel sterile. We worked our way back inside. Every room was empty, untouched, silent. I ran my flashlight over the walls. A child's drawing taped to the refrigerator. Curly-headed stick figures holding hands beneath a bright sun. The sun was smudged red, like blood. My throat tightened. A mother's refrigerator art shouldn't look like a crime scene, but here it was. I touched the drawing, careful not to disturb the tape. The paper was damp, wrinkled, as though someone had pressed it there in a hurry. Then Green's voice crackled. "Sir, you need to see this." He stood at the threshold of the master bedroom. I hurried over. The mattress was stripped bare, no sheets, no blankets. Nothing but springs and a few loose mattress, fibers drifting in the stale air. And on the hardwood floor a series of muddy footprints, too small for an adult, weaving from one side of the room to the other. He pointed. "Do you think it's—" He didn't finish. The question hung heavy. I didn't want to think about children in trouble. Yet those footprints told the only story here. Someone small had been here recently, walking in circles, nowhere to go. I set my flashlight on the dresser. The beam caught the edge of a phone handset off the hook laying on the bed. I lifted it gently. The cord was stretched taut toward a shattered picture frame on the nightstand. The photo inside was broken, glass shards littering the floor. Behind the shards was an image of a little girl in a blue dress, smiling. I dropped the shard-laden frame. "Dispatch," I said, voice steadier than I felt. Caller hung up again. "I'm going to see if I can trace the number." Fingers trembling, I ran the phone number through the onboard system. Nada. No record, no subscriber. This wasn't unheard of. Prepaid burner phones left no trail. But why dial from inside your own home? I rose and scanned the shadowed doorway. "Green, cover the window," I muttered. He swung the beam outside. Rain had stopped, leaving the yard slick and mirrors smooth. No footprints at all now, as though the muddy path had been wiped clean. I exhaled. "Let's get out of here before it starts up again," I said. But I didn't mean the rain. We stepped into the hallway when the line crackled to life in my hand. The handset vibrated against my palm. Static, then breathing. A soft, ragged inhalation. I pressed my ear to it. The breathing slowed, steadied, and then a whisper so faint I thought I'd imagined it. "Don't come back." The line went dead. I stared at the handset, white knuckles wrapped tight around it. Green put a hand on my shoulder. His eyes were dark, hollow. "You okay, sir?" I nodded, though I wasn't. Not even close. I keyed my radio. Dispatch were code 4. Negative findings, resident missing. We'll set up canvas and check neighbors. The dispatcher copied it. But as I looked back at the empty doorway, lit by a single sliver of moonlight, I wondered who had answered that call. And more importantly, who was still there? I eased the cruiser onto the slick pavement of Birchwood Lane, the rain-wet streetlights casting wavering halos against the night sky. The dispatcher's calm voice crackled through the radio speaker. 911, hang up at 421 Birchwood. No voice, just breathing. Unit 5. Alpha, respond code 2. I clicked the mic off and exhaled so hard that my breath steamed on the inside of my windshield. My partner, Evans, gave me a sharp nod. He'd been on the job 15 years, long enough to know that just breathing on a silent line was more dangerous than any shouting or shot fired. We parked 20 feet from the curb. I killed the engine, the sudden silence feeling like the moment before a scream. I slipped on my rain-spattered jacket and lifted my flashlight. My boots crunched on the gravel driveway as I approached the house. The address placard glinted at me. 421. A modest two-story, white clapboard turned dull gray by the weather. Shutters hanging crooked like open jaws. No porch light, no movement. I tapped my radio. Edgewood PD, Officer Malloy. I'm on scene. Inside, the hallway was dark, except for a sliver of pale light from a cracked window in the back door. My beam cut through the gloom. Family photos on the walls, dates blurred by damp. A child's drawing magneted to the fridge in the kitchen, half peeled, showing two stick figures under a red sun. The sun was smudged, as though someone had dabbed at it with their sleeve. "Did you hear that?" Evans hissed, voice low. I froze, a soft thump in the living room. Furniture settling, I told myself. But then a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across hardwood. Long, uneven creaks that ended an inch from the wall. I crept forward, every nerve taut. My flashlight caught the edge of a shoe, a child's sneaker, lying on its side under the coffee table. Pristine, white despite the mud outside. No one lived here with children, as far as records showed. I radioed dispatch. One sneaker found inside. No shoes visible on the front porch. Possible juvenile presence. Line is still open, but silent. The dispatcher acknowledged automatically. I swallowed, my throat dry. Evans stood behind me, spotlight trained on the far corner. "Back door?" he murmured. The chain lock was dangling, swaying like a pendulum, though no breeze blew through the closed house. I clicked on my own mic. "Cover the rear exit, then move to the French doors leading to the backyard." My flashlight beam danced across the patio. Stones slick with rain. Potted plants overturned, soil spilled in dark arcs. Footprints led from the broken pot toward the fence, stopping a dozen feet short. No prints beyond that. In the dim light, I could see the gate latch had been lifted and dropped. Imprint marks in the wood grain where fingers had pressed. Too deliberate to be coincidence. I lifted the latch gently. It clicked shut again. Handprints? I rubbed my gloved fingers over the cold metal. They came away glistening with moisture, and with something else I couldn't place. Then the line on my radio crackled. "Officer Malloy?" I tapped the microphone. "Go ahead." Static, then breathing, slow, labored, too close to my ear. I jerked the mic away, heart pounding. Evans yanked his light to the house. A curtain fluttered upstairs, though the window was closed. We looked up together, beams slashed across the siding. No silhouette, but the curtain pulsed again, as though someone were breathing on it from the inside. I called for backup. Dispatch 421 Birchwood, requesting immediate assistance. Potential trespasser. Caller unknown. My teeth were starting to chatter even though my body felt on fire with adrenaline. Evans crouched by the gate. "Sir, look at this." He shone the light on the fence post. Letters carved cleanly into the wood. "Help me." I pressed my palm against the cold post. Engraved fresh. Splinters still clinging to the carved edges. Someone was desperate, I said. My voice cracked, though I tried to keep it even. Across the yard, the window glowed that pale stripe of light. I heard it then, breathing. The single ragged inhalation that no human should be able to sustain on a 911 call. I raised the phone mic to my ear, but before I could speak, the line went dead. Evans and I advanced to the back door together, guns holstered but fingers itching. Every instinct told me to take cover, to wait for the cavalry. But this was my beat, and some voice inside me wouldn't let me cede ground. I slid the chain lock into place, swung the door open. The backyard was empty. No footprints beyond the fence, no sign of anyone slipping away. Just the wet grass glistening in the beam. I stepped back inside, heart hammering. The living room lay quiet, untouched except for that sneaker and the overturned pot. I jogged to the hallway and checked the front door, locked from the inside. No way out that I could see. The house was sealed, but the breathing had come through the phone from here, from inside these walls. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of dread. "Evans," I whispered, "let's sweep the upstairs." He nodded, swallowing hard. We kicked off our boots at the top of the stairs, leaving muddy prints that would later fade in the rain. The stairwell smelled of damp carpet and something sweet, like candy left too long in the heat. At the landing, 2 doors, left to the master bedroom, right to a smaller room. The master door was closed. I eased my hand to the knob. It twisted under my grip. Inside, the bed was made neatly, sheets crisp and smooth, but the nightstand lamp was on, flickering softly. I stepped in. No footprints on the carpet, no items disturbed, except for the phone sitting on the pillow, the handset off the hook. I stared at the receiver cord, which stretched taut to the edge of the window frame. My jaw clenched. Someone had moved that phone from downstairs to the bedroom, then dialed 911 and refused to speak. But why stay? Why let us in? I picked up the handset, knuckles white. My partner hovered behind me. The handset crackled, breathing, slow but steady. I pressed my free hand against the window. The curtains were drawn tightly, but I saw the curtains shift, as though someone were pressed against them, looking out. Then the breathing stopped, and the curtains snapped still. I set the phone down, backing toward the door. "Evans, get the kids' room." He moved to the smaller door. I nearly followed, then heard it again. A soft creak, like floorboards cracking under weight, coming from the hallway behind me. I spun, flashlight beam jagging across the landing. Nothing, just the empty hallway stretching toward the stairs. The call came back to life in my hand. A whisper so low it took a moment to register. "Save me." Then silence. I slammed the handset down. The lamp on the nightstand winked off. Total darkness. I drew my flashlight and gun hand together. "We're done here," I said, though what I meant was that I needed to get out before the house swallowed us whole. Evans grabbed my arm. "Sir?" I nodded toward the closet door, cracked open a sliver. A pair of small boots peered out, muddy and worn. Inside lay the rest of the sneakers, one still on the girl's feet. My heart froze. I yanked open the closet, sweep of light, empty. Just the boots staring at me from the floor, laces undone as though someone had stepped out and melted into the walls. I radioed in, "Dispatch, suspect, child, unaccounted for. We're pulling out, setting perimeter. Need K9 and child services." My voice sounded distant, echoing off walls that felt too close. At the top of the stairs I paused, looked back. The house loomed silent, patient. I heard footsteps behind me on the stairs, light, small, retreating down. But when I spun to follow, I saw only my own boots, echoing mine back at me. I climbed into the cruiser, Evans sliding in beside me. I called the dispatcher. Lines still open. Breathing faint, maybe gone. I can't tell. My fingers hovered over the handset button, waiting to hear that ragged inhale one more time. But all I got was static. As we pulled away, sirens distant behind us, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the dark silhouette of 421 Birchwood. No porch light, no movement. But I could swear I saw a shape standing at the window, pale, face pressed to glass, watching us go. Then a hand reached out and wiped a line of condensation, creating a small heart shape. I didn't glance back again. Not until I got home, stripped off my uniform, and still felt that quiet heart beating against my chest. And I knew I'd never sleep until I found out who was left behind in that house. I eased my hand off the radio mic and let the engine idle as Evans reached for the map light, knocking the visor open to shine its pale glow on the street grid. "We lost the kid's trail at the fence line," I said quietly, voice low, but I can't shake the feeling she's still inside the house. The cruiser's interior was thick with the scent of damp polyester and adrenaline. Outside, its headlights cut twin wedges of yellow through the inky night. "Sir," Evans whispered, "backup's 10 minutes out. Should we go back in?" I shook my head, eyes glued to the rearview mirror, where 421 Birchwood loomed like a dark promise. "We wait," I replied. "We let the K9 team do their job." He nodded and clicked off the overhead light, plunging us back into red-tinged dashboard darkness. The radio crackled. "Unit 5 Alpha, K9 en route." The dispatcher's tone was soft, like she sensed the urgency in my last transmission. I killed the engine and leaned forward, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. Too many silent calls, too many empty rooms, too many questions that never got answered. I thought back to the moment I'd seen her boots in that closet, muddy, laced, ready to explore. A child trapped somewhere in the walls of a house that should have been safe. The doubt clawed at me. Had I been too hasty pulling out? Should I have stayed? But if I'd pressed further alone, who knows what might have happened to both of us? A distant siren finally split the night, growing louder, closer, like a lifeline cutting through the haze. I slid out of the cruiser. The rain had stopped entirely, but the asphalt still gleamed under the street lamps. I walked to the front of the house, Evans on my heels. The K9 unit pulled up. Officer Delgado with Tracker, a German Shepherd veteran of dozens of searches. Delgado gave Tracker the leash. The dog's ears perked, nose lifted. He exhaled in short bursts, tail flicking. We all paused as Tracker's gaze locked onto the front door. He let out a low whine. I exchanged a look with Delgado. "He's on it," Delgado said quietly. "Let him lead." We stepped back as a Tracker nosed the doorframe, then slipped inside like a shadow. Evans radioed. "Entry for K9." I keyed back. Understood. Tracker's paw prints marred the welcome mat as he padded forward into the hallway. His head swiveled, nostrils flaring, tail stiffening. I followed, flashlight in hand. Inside, the air was still, the house breathing its own cold breath. Tracker moved methodically. Kitchen, living room, hallway. At each turn he paused, head cocked, then pressed deeper. We reached the base of the stairs. Tracker stopped, stared up, hackles raised. He let out a single, sharp bark, 2 barks, then moved slowly upward. Evans and I exchanged a glance. I offered Delgado my flashlight and he clipped it to his vest, keeping both hands free. Tracker's paws sounded muted on the carpet, but each tap seemed to echo in the narrow stairwell. At the landing, Tracker halted and lowered his body, nose to the floor. He took in a shuddering breath, then bolted for the master bedroom door. It stood ajar. He nosed it open with his snout and disappeared inside. We heard his claws scratch against the hardwood as he circled. Then a silent pause, long enough to make me swallow hard. Suddenly, Tracker bounded back out, barking frantically. Hackles bristled, eyes wild. He lunged toward the smaller bedroom door across the hall. That door creaked open on its own, slow and reluctant, as though pushed from within. Evans' flashlight beam caught movement inside. A small figure crouched in the far corner. My heart stalled. "Holy!" I reached for my radio. "Officer down! No, we've got a juvenile! Cover me!" I sprinted forward, blood in my ears. The figure didn't move. I raised my flashlight high. The beam cut across the room. A little girl, skirt damp and muddy, eyes wide as saucers. Her hair hung in unkempt strands, wet and tangled. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared. I dropped to one knee. "Hey there, it's okay, we're friends," I said in a soft rush. "Can you stand up?" She shook her head, gaze flicking toward the closet. I followed her eyes. The door was shut again, solid, locked. How had Tracker gotten in? My pulse thundered. Delgado set Tracker's collar secure. "Dog safe," he murmured, voice tight. I scooped the girl into my arms, careful not to hurt her. Her legs were thin beneath me, trembling. She smelled of mildew, fear, and something else. Hope, maybe? I held her close. "We're gonna get you out, okay?" She didn't respond, but clutched my uniform sleeve like it was a lifeline. Evans moved to secure the room, scanning for any other clues. I pressed the girl's face to my chest, feeling her heartbeat, fast, shallow, but alive. "Dispatch, we have the juvenile safe," I said, barely above a whisper. "Request medical and child services, ETA local unit." As I spoke, I noticed the girl's boots, still on her feet, caked in mud from somewhere deep in this house. Her jacket was gone. Her shirt was damp with sweat and something darker. 2 patrol cars and the K9 unit crowded into the hallway outside. Footsteps and radios sifted through the thin walls. A medic team stirred in the kitchen as we brought her downstairs. Tracker sat at the foot of the stairs, eyes unwavering on me as if asking, "Is she okay?" I carried the girl down the last steps, careful with every creak. We passed the living room where the sneaker had lain, and the single shoe was gone. Only a bare, hardwood floor remained. I glanced over my shoulder at the quiet house. Its windows glowed as though it were breathing, watching me leave. Outside, the medics took her from my arms. She looked up at me, eyes shining in the ambulance lights. For the first time since I'd picked her up, she spoke. One word, voice fragile. "Thanks." Then they ushered her inside, doors slammed, and sirens cut through the midnight hush as they sped away. Evans shut the back door of the house. The chain lock swung on its bolt. I watched as he latched it again, definite, final. Then we both turned to the house. It sat motionless now, shutters closed, rain dripping off its eaves. No lights, no signs of life. Just the echo of steps and Tracker's steady bark. In the cruiser, I dialed dispatch. "Line still open?" He paused, static, a breath, then nothing. I didn't linger. I tossed the handset aside, slipping into the driver's seat. Evans fired up the engine. As we pulled away, I stole one last glance at 421 Birchwood. The windows dark, but I could swear the silhouette of a child lingered at the upstairs window, hand pressed against the glass. Then the window panes wobbled, as though the house had exhaled. The cruiser's taillights faded into the distance before I finally exhaled. Birchwood Lane lay silent behind us, its street lamps sputtering like distant embers. Evans sat beside me, tension coiled in his shoulders. Tracker resting in the back seat with his nose pressed to the window. The girl was safe, on her way to medical care in a quiet bed tonight, but I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. We drove in silence until the dispatcher's voice cut through. "Unit 5 Alpha, can you confirm you're clear to return to station?" My fingers hovered over the mic. I glanced at Evans. His eyes met mine, both of us knowing the answer. "Affirmative," I replied. "We're code 4, returning." I set the radio down and stared out at the slick road ahead. The station lights glowed in the distance, a beacon of normalcy. Yet inside, my mind replayed every breath, every footprint, every pregnant pause in that house. I felt the story wasn't over, couldn't be. Houses like 421 Birchwood remembered what happened within their walls. They kept track of energy left behind. A child's frightened whisper, a desperate plea for help, the echo of a policeman's boots thundering up a stairwell. At the station, I filed my report while Evans checked on the girl's status with medical staff. Tracker dozed in the corner of the squad bay, paws twitching as if chasing phantoms. I watched him, wondering what sense he smelled that I couldn't. The cold fear of abandonment, the sweetness of hope, and something else. An old, almost metallic tang that reminded me of sorrow itself. Hours later, when the paperwork was done and the sky hinted at dawn, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was crisp, and the first birds were tentatively beginning their morning calls. I walked to my cruiser but paused at the edge of the lot. My gaze drifted back to the street where the girl had vanished from sight. Somewhere in that house, her presence lingered, an imprint on the walls that I could still feel behind my eyes. I pulled out my phone and called the dispatcher. "Dispatch, this is Malloy. Keep the line open on 421 Birchwood. I want to monitor any calls or signals coming from that address." There was a pause. Then the dispatcher's tone was low, respectful. "Line open on your mark, Malloy." I keyed the mic and sat on the hood of the cruiser. Engines idling behind me, fluorescent lights overhead. I pressed talk. Static, then nothing, until that breathing rose up in my ear, slow, uneven, like someone finally exhaling after holding their breath too long. My heart seized. I dug my nails into my palm. The breath stopped. The line went dead. I sat motionless for a long minute, absorbing the emptiness. I stood and flicked off the mic. "Evans," I said into the quiet, "we're not done with Birchwood." He appeared at my side, eyes tired but resolute. "Sir?" I beckoned him closer. "Find me every call that's ever come from that block. Not just 421, every dead air hang-up for the last 5 years." He nodded, pulling out his tablet. As dawn broke fully, the station buzzed to life around us, but Evans and I huddled over a map, marking pins at each silent call address. 14 in total, each within a 3-block radius of Birchwood, each ending the same way. No words, just breath, then emptiness. I traced a finger along the pins, feeling the weight of each one. I remembered the names we'd never known, callers who vanished before we arrived, children who left behind single shoes, adults who abandoned their own kitchens to step outside into the night, and then into nothing. Tracker stirred and nudged my coat, reminding me I wasn't alone. I patted his neck. "We'll get to the bottom of this, boy." The list of addresses gleamed on the screen, and I felt a dark promise coil in my gut. This was bigger than a single missing child or a lone, silent call. It was a pattern, a network of silence threaded through Edgewood's quiet streets, and every thread begged to be unraveled. I gathered the map and reports, sliding them into a manila folder. Overhead, the fluorescent lights flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw that small handprint on the ceiling. Faded, half erased, but unmistakably there. I closed my eyes and pictured the girl's face. Hope and fear mingled in her wide eyes, trusting me to bring her home. My phone buzzed. New dispatch call. A 911 hang-up, this time on Willow Bend Way, 2 streets over. I glanced at Evans. He exhaled. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," I replied. I clipped my badge and radio to my vest, shouldered my flashlight, and stepped into the dawn's pale light. As we climbed into the cruiser, the station behind us waking to a new day, I pressed talk on the mic. Unit 5 Alpha responding to new silent call. Willow Bend Way, keep line open. I flicked off the engine and let the world shift around me. Every silent call was a question. Every empty house a riddle. And I was the only one left asking. Before we pulled away, I glanced back at the station's doors closing behind us, then at Tracker in the back seat, and finally out at the quiet neighborhood waking to morning routines. I flicked off the cruiser's lights and let the engine settle into silence before lifting my radio mic again. Unit 5 Alpha, en route to Willow Bend Way. Keep line open. Evans pulled away from the station, Tracker's head popping up in the rearview mirror as though he'd sensed the new pulse of tension in the air. The streetlights on Willow Bend were spaced wide and dim, so our headlights carved two bright stripes of wet pavement ahead. We stopped at 212 Willow Bend, an old bungalow tucked behind overgrown hedges. The address plaque was crooked, its numbers half hidden by climbing ivy. I killed the engine, grabbed my flashlight, and slipped out into the damp morning air. The world was gray around us. Trees still dripping with overnight dew, the grass pressing cold against my boots. The house loomed silent and shuttered, blinds drawn tight. No porch light, no indication anyone was home. Only the steady drip, drip, drip of water rolling off the eaves. I motioned to Evans and nodded toward the front door. He checked the windows as I approached. No light inside. I raised my knuckles and rapped the door 3 times, sharp, deliberate. "Edgewood PD, anyone here?" My voice echoed into the silence, then died. I waited. Nothing. The air seemed to hold its breath with me. Slowly, I slid my keyring out, just in case, but the lock turned under my grip. The door swung open with a low groan, revealing darkness beyond. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the entryway. A narrow foyer, walls scuffed, paint peeling in sheets. A single tile had cracked, spiderwebbing outward like an injury. The smell was faint but unmistakable, wet plaster and mold. I stepped in, careful not to disturb the few objects scattered on the floor. A child's stuffed rabbit, ear-torn. A cracked picture frame showing a family of 3, faces blurred by water damage. A single muddy footprint leading from the threshold into the living room. I radioed dispatch. Front door unlocked. Evidence of juvenile entry, line silent but open. Then I moved down the hallway, Evans close behind me. Tracker padded along the foyer floor, nose low. He paused at the living room threshold, whine low in his throat. I studied the room. Furniture pushed aside as though in a struggle. Curtains askew and on the floor. Blankets, pillows, all arranged in a rough circle around a small space of bare hardwood. In the center lay an overturned toy truck, its wheels still spinning as if someone had dropped it mid-play. I frowned. No sign of forced entry here. Yet the circle of bedding suggested someone had tried to make a nest, safe ground amid danger. I moved around the edge, shining my light on the walls. Scrawled in crayon along the baseboard, "They're watching." The letters were shaky, uneven, childish. My pulse quickened. I rubbed the words with my glove, fresh, still tacky. Tracker's leash went taut. He tugged me toward the kitchen doorway. I followed. The kitchen was nearly bare, one cabinet door hanging open, a lone cup on the counter, its handle cracked. The sink was dry, but the faucet was loose, swinging gently as though it had been pushed. I stepped forward and noticed, on the floor by the sink, another footprint. Larger this time, booted, deep in the dust that had settled there. It led out through a side door that hung open to the backyard. I clicked my radio. Possible adult suspect presence. Side door open, tracking exit. Evans moved to the door and scanned the yard. The grass was tall, unkempt, and studded with garden tools scattered as if dropped in haste. Beyond, the fence was low and broken, and I saw the muddy outline of a child's bare footprint leading away across the garden. I followed, Tracker at my side, toward the rear gate. The yard was a tangle of overturned chairs and a collapsed swing set, its chains draped over a fence post like watchful fingers. I crouched by the footprint. It was small, toes splayed, a child no older than 6 or 7. My throat constricted. I snapped a photo with my phone and texted it to dispatch. Then I walked the trail, yard, fence, neighbor's driveway, and finally the public sidewalk, where the footprints vanished. Only one pair remained. Evans joined me, flashlight and radio in hand. "No prints beyond this," he confirmed. "She must have been lifted or carried." I nodded, eyes scanning the street lamps overhead. No witnesses, no other tracks. Just the hush of the morning and the promise of unanswered questions. I stood and wiped rain from my brow. "Let's widen the search," I said. "Check every house on this block for camera, motion sensor, anything." Evans tapped his tablet. "Starting now." As he worked, I radioed for K9 and the missing persons unit to meet us here. Tracker sat at my feet, tail thumping once, twice, and settled. He looked up at me, eyes bright with focus. I knelt and patted his head. "Find her, buddy." He stood, nose lowered, then bolted across the street in pursuit of a scent only he could follow. I sprinted after him, boots sloshing in puddles. Tracker led me down Willow Bend, across Maple Court, and toward an unremarkable cul-de-sac where brick-faced homes stood in solemn rows. He sniffed along driveways, paused at one mailbox, its post freshly trimmed, then darted around to the side yard. I followed into a narrow passage between 2 houses, overgrown with brambles so thick they tore at my coat. Tracker plunged in, growl low. I shoved past the brambles, throat burning with exertion. At the end of the path was an abandoned shed, its door hanging off one hinge. Tracker stood outside, hackles raised. I circled the building, shining my light on rotting wood and rusted hinges. The door lay on the ground, propped against the wall. The hinge screws had been pried loose. I stepped inside the dark interior, careful to avoid broken glass and scattered tools. The beam revealed a small mattress in the corner, threadbare and stained. On the mattress lay a doll missing its eyes. Tracker nosed it, whine suppressed in his throat. I crouched and scooped it up. Its cloth face was dirty, arms stained with old blood, or what I hoped was rust from the shed. Then I felt it, the weight of eyes on me. Not Tracker's or my own. Something else. My breath caught as I scanned the shadows. There, by the far wall, pressed against the shed's unpainted planks, was a pair of small hands gripping the wood from the inside, fingers pale, trembling. I raised my flashlight. A little girl stepped into the beam. Her dress torn, hair matted, eyes wide with relief and fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. I rose and knelt before her. "You're safe now," I said gently. Tracker sat beside me, pressing his muzzle against her leg. She reached trembling hand to his fur. I placed my flashlight on the mattress and pulled out my radio. Unit 5 Alpha. Suspect juvenile located in shed behind 235 Willow Bend. Send EMS and transport team. My voice wavered despite myself, the weight of too many silent calls, too many empty homes, lifted in that moment by the sight of her alive. As I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders, I noticed on the shed's wall a message scrawled in what looked like chalk. "Help me find him." My chest tightened. I looked at Tracker, then at the girl. She followed my gaze, hand trembling over the words. I knew then this wasn't random. It was part of something larger. 3 houses, 2 blocks, one pattern of silence and fear. I lifted her into my arms again, careful and reverent. She pressed her face into my chest, a soft sob escaping. Tracker placed his head against my knee, vigilant. I radioed dispatch. All units, be advised, possible person of interest at large, male, described only as him. He could be anywhere in this neighborhood. Proceed with caution. As Evans arrived, medics in tow, I carried the girl toward the ambulance. Her small voice finally found its way. He took me. I paused in the muddy path, heart skidding to a stop. "Who took you?" I asked, voice low and steady. She looked up at me, eyes wide and wet, and whispered one word that froze me to the bone. "Father." I eased the girl onto the rear seat of the ambulance as medics moved in, lifting her onto a stretcher. Tracker sat at my side, alert, ears twitching at every sound. Evans handed me the folder of reports I'd filled in the cruiser. I flipped it closed and slipped it into my jacket pocket. The night was bleeding into dawn now, pale light creeping over rooftops, wreaths of mist drifting in the air. We watched as the ambulance doors closed, the vehicle's red lights fading down the street. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, the weight of what had happened settling in like a stone. Tracker nudged my hand. I looked down at him. "Good boy," I whispered. "She's safe now." Evans approached with 2 travel mugs of coffee, steam curling upward. He handed one to me. I took a grateful sip, bitter, hot, real. He stood for a moment in silence, then he said, "Sir." "What now?" I set the coffee on the tailgate of an unmarked cruiser. "Now," I said slowly, "we close that case and then reopen all the others. Willow Bend, Birchwood, Cedar. Every silent call in Edgewood for the last 3 years. We map them, we find the pattern, and we follow it back to whoever's causing this." My voice was grim but steady. Evans nodded, eyes sharp. "I'll get the team together and start pulling logs, phone records, dispatch tapes, neighborhood canvases." "Good," I replied. "And Evans," he turned to me, "if we're dealing with a network, someone abducting kids, leaving them for the silence, then who and why become our only leads. We have to think bigger than one house, one street. This is systematic." He looked at the empty shed and then up at the quiet bungalow. "Agreed." The sun was fully up now, washing the street in gray light. I inhaled, savoring the crisp morning air, trying to clear the lingering dread. Tracker stood, nose to the ground, tail wagging once as if relieved. "Let's get to work," I said, climbing into the cruiser. Evans climbed in beside me, tablet open, fingers already tapping. Tracker hopped up into the back seat, curling into a ball on the floor. I started the engine and flicked on the dash lights. The tablet screen glowed with dispatch maps and call logs. "Edgewood PD," I murmured. "We've only scratched the surface." Evans looked over the data. 14 silent calls so far, 2 recoveries, 12 still open. I nodded, jaw set. "Then we find those 12, we close everyone, and we bring them home." We pulled away, Tracker's head resting on the seat back, eyes closing. The streets of Edgewood lay ahead, blank slates for us to fill with answers, not questions. But as we passed 235 Willow Bend, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at the dark windows of that shed. In my mind, I saw the girl's hands pressed against the plank, trying to claw her way out of silence, and I realized every call, every house, every footprint was a voice crying out, and I would not let one of them go unheard. I let the cruiser idle at the edge of the station parking lot, pinching the bridge of my nose to stave off a headache that felt like a jackhammer behind my eyes. The first light of dawn washed the world in pale blue, but it did little to cut through the shadows still clinging to my thoughts. Evans climbed out. rubbing his forearms as if trying to shake off a nightmare, while Tracker hopped down and shook his coat, sending droplets arcing through the air. "Sir," Evans said quietly, "the teams pulled every record we requested. Phone pings, silent call logs, dispatch transcripts, everything." He waved the tablet at me. I stepped over, squinting at the map overlaid with pins marking Cedar Street, Birchwood, Willow Bend, and half a dozen other locations across Edgewood. 14 calls in 3 years, I murmured. 2 recoveries, 12 unresolved. Evans tapped a pin on Greenwood Drive. "Next cluster is here, house number 89. It matches the pattern. Single hang-up, open line, no voices, ambient noise, usually static or distant breathing. Neighbors reported loud footsteps, occasional banging, then silence. We've got a patrol car staged 2 blocks away." I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "Let's go," I said at last. "Tracker, you ready?" The shepherd sniffed the air, lowered his head, and wagged his tail in that precise, alert way he had whenever a trail was fresh. I patted his side. "Good boy. Lead the way." We piled into the cruiser and drove the 2 blocks to Greenwood Drive in near silence. No sirens, no lights, just the low thrum of the engine and the soft pat-pat of rain returning. The house at 89 stood squat and unremarkable, vinyl siding streaked with grime, a sagging porch roof, an unkempt lawn overrun with weeds. I killed the engine and squeezed my flashlight. "Edgewood PD," I called, stepping onto the porch. The door was locked, so I knocked 3 times, firm, measured. Evans circled to check the windows while Tracker nosed along the threshold. "Doors bolted," Evans reported. I pulled out my key ring. The lock turned under my hand. The door creaked open, revealing a gloom that smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. Inside, the living room was gone. Furniture stripped out, walls scraped bare, baseboards missing. A single chair sat in the middle of the floor, its paint peeled, cushion shredded. On it lay a smartphone, screen cracked but powered. Ringer off, volume up. I picked it up, no notifications. I pressed the green call button. The screen showed 1 missed call at 2:47 a.m., a number blocked. I hit call back, but it went straight to voicemail. "Please leave a message." I dropped the phone into my coat pocket. "Silence," I said, just like always. Tracker growled, low and urgent. I swept my flashlight to the kitchen doorway. The floor beyond was soggy, with puddles that reflected the beam like tiny moons. I stepped forward and saw footprints again. Bare feet, too small for an adult, heading toward the basement door. The door was closed. I knelt and noticed scratch marks on the edge of the wood, as though someone had dug their nails in to hold on. The door rattled once, then stopped. I summoned Evans. He came in, shoulders tight, and shined his light on the marks. "They're fresh," he said. "Someone's down there right now." I felt a shiver, though a cold draft of air flowed up the stairs. Something had locked the door behind them. They hadn't escaped. I clicked the mic. "Dispatch, 89 Greenwood. Possible juvenile hidden in basement. Copy?" The reply was slow, cautious. "Copy that, 5 Alpha. Send K9 and backup immediately." I didn't wait. I braced my shoulder and kicked at the door. The wood fractured under my boot. I yanked it open, the hinges screaming protest. Tracker bounded down the first step, then 2, nose to the ground, tail held rigid. I followed with Evans close behind. The basement was a raw concrete vault, walls damp, pipes rattling overhead. A single bulb hung by a frayed wire, flickering. My flashlight beam danced across the floor. An overturned chair, empty food wrappers, a circle of toys, blocks, action figures, a battered teddy bear. Then I saw her, small, hunched in the far corner, knees drawn to her chin, arms wrapped around them. Her hair tangled, face streaked with tears and dust. I knelt suddenly, heart pounding too loud in my ears. "Hey there," I said softly. "It's okay, you're safe." She looked up, wide-eyed, but didn't move. Her breathing was rapid, shallow. Tracker nosed her shoulder and she flinched, pressing her back against the cinder block wall. I noticed on the wall beside her the same childish scrawl I'd seen before. "They will come back." My stomach twisted. I reached out slowly. "Can you stand?" She nodded, voice gone. I rose and extended my hand. She took it, fingers cold, trembling, and I lifted her gently. Up the stairs, Tracker at my heels, I carried her past the living room chair and out into the kitchen. Evans was there with the ambulance. Medics rushed forward, and I set her down on a gurney. She looked up at me. For the first time, her lips moved. "Thank you," she whispered. Then her face pinched, as though recalling something sharp. "Why did you come?" she asked, voice small. I knelt beside her. "Because someone was listening. Because no call is ever really silent." Her eyes filled with tears. "But I'm still here," she said, "and I'm still scared." I placed my hand over hers. "I know, but I'm not leaving." I rose and stepped back. The ambulance doors slammed, siren humming low, and they rolled away into the morning haze. I turned to the house, Tracker by my side, and felt the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions pressing down. 14 silent calls, 4 recoveries, 12 left behind, each one a voice crying out in the dark. I unshouldered my radio and whispered into it. "Unit 5, Alpha to dispatch. Keep every line open on Greenwood, Willow, Birchwood, Cedar. Every street in Edgewood. We've got someone out there who thinks silent calls go unheard. We'll prove them wrong." Tracker nudged my leg, tail wagging in a slow, determined rhythm. I glanced down at him and nodded. "Let's finish this, boy." As we walked away, I glanced back once more at 89 Greenwood Drive. The basement window was dark, but in my mind I saw her small face pressed against the glass, tears glistening in the dim light. I felt her fear, her hope, her will to survive, and I knew this story would never end until every silent call had found an answer. I lifted my eyes to the empty street. The early sun glinted off rain-slick pavement, but the shadows between the houses remained, and somewhere in that gloom. I sat behind the wheel long after Evans and Tracker had disappeared into the station, the cruiser's engine ticking as it cooled in the gray dawn. My flash collar light blinked on and off, each spike of brightness reflecting in my eyes like distant flashbacks. The child's sneaker on Cedar Street, the whisper through the fridge door, the murmur from the projection booth, the plea scrawled in crayon, the girl's boots at Willow Bend, the father's shadow in Greenwood, and the wide, silent gaze of each child we'd pulled from the darkness. 14 calls, 7 locations, 7 recoveries, 12 unanswered questions, and one truth I'd learned too late. Silence isn't empty. It's full of voices waiting to be heard. I killed the engine, cut the headlights, and sat in absolute quiet, letting the weight of the past 3 years settle around me like a shroud. Every case file I drafted lay spread across the passenger seat. Reports, sketches of footprints, GPS pings, call logs, and my own notes in the margins. They're still there. I closed my eyes and saw the child crouched in the shed, pressed against the planks, calling out in the only way she could. I felt her heartbeat against my chest as I lifted her into the ambulance, felt her small hand slip from mine when she whispered, "Father." I remembered the way Tracker's ears drooped when he couldn't find a scent, and how his tail thumped when he finally did, A single text buzzed on my phone. From dispatch. New call, 109 Elmwood Avenue. 2:17 a.m., hang up, no voice, ambient noise, something moving. Respond code 2. My pulse spiked. One more pin to drop, one more silent voice to reach. I set the phone aside and unclipped my badge, tapping it against the dash. Tracker bounded back out from the station, tail wagging once but eyes serious, ready. Evans appeared a moment later, raincoat clutched to his side, face drawn but determined. 209 Elmwood, I said softly, voice rough with fatigue and resolve. Go time. I opened the cruiser door. Tracker leapt in beside me, settling on the floor. I climbed in, fired up the engine, and clicked on the radio. Unit 5 Alpha responding to Elmwood. Keep line open. The mic crackled, then fell silent, until I heard it. A breath. Slow, shallow, deliberate, not quite human. It filled the cruiser's cab like a ghost slipping in through the vents, curling around my ribs. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Tracker, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. He let out a soft sigh of recognition. I eased onto Elmwood Avenue, headlights carving two narrow beams through overhanging trees. The houses were dark, each a slumbering sentinel. Yet I knew what lurked behind those walls. The frozen silhouette of a child, the invisible chains of fear, the echo of footsteps on hardwood, the pleading hush of a line left open. And I knew that tonight, like every night before, some unanswered voice would reach out in its own silence and find me standing there. I parked in front of 109, heart pounding. The night was still. The rain had stopped. Only the distant hum of an idle streetlight. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening. The line was open. I heard nothing but my own breathing, ragged and hopeful, then unmistakable. A soft, urgent whisper crackling through the mic. Please, it trembled, frail as a moth's wing against a window pane. I exhaled, hand trembling as I reached for the door handle. I hear you, I murmured, voice steady despite the storm inside me. I'm here. The line went dead, and I knew, once again, it was never empty. I sat in the cruiser, idling with the heater on low, staring at the screen showing the open 911 line. No caller ID, no signal. Only the open line and the rhythmic drip of water. The dispatcher had patched me through as soon as the line lit up, nothing but the raw sound of breath. I watched the latitude and longitude spin into coordinates near Willow Creek Drive, a stretch of faded asphalt flanked by shadowed lawns and silent driveways. I clicked on the mic. Unit 4-Delta en route. ETA 2 minutes. The soft static of my radio answered me back, then silence, thicker than the darkness pressing against the cruiser's glass. By the time I reached house number 1276, the rain had picked up. Droplets smeared across, my visor as I stepped out of the vehicle, boots sinking slightly into the soggy ground. The street lamp overhead hummed, its yellow glow pulsing like a failing heart. I lifted my flashlight, the beam cutting a swath through the night and revealing the front porch. The wooden boards were slick, mottled with dark spots where moss had taken hold. I could see muddy footprints leading up 3 steps. 2 boots' impressions, scuffed and uneven, coated with wet gravel. No sign of the caller, no movement behind the drawn curtains. I tapped the radio mic. On scene, no visual yet, approaching front door. I shifted my weight, hand hovering near my holster, and pushed the doorbell. Nothing. No chime echoed inside. So I knocked, once, twice, soft but deliberate. On the 3rd knock, the door swung open under my hand. The hinges protested with a groan that echoed through the empty foyer. I breathed in, smelled damp plaster and the faint tang of mildew. My flashlight swept left to right, revealing a hallway strewn with soggy newspaper pages, their headlines obscure in the half-light. The front room to my right was dark, curtains drawn tight. I stepped inside, boots splashing across a pool of standing water that seeped in beneath the windows. The living room felt too small for the emptiness. A single armchair sat by the fireplace, its fabric torn and sodden. A framed family photo lay face down on the rug, the glass cracked, spider webbing out from a central impact spot. I knelt and turned it over. 2 children's faces, smiling wide in the mid-morning sun, now forever frozen in a moment I had no context for. I radioed dispatch. Warren 4-Delta, inside the residence. No sign of life. Apartment looks occupied, but nobody here. My voice sounded jarringly loud in the hush. The radio crackled back static before fading again. I moved toward the staircase at the end of the hall. Each creak of the step beneath my weight felt like a confession. The upper floor lay beyond, where the family bedrooms would be, but the landing was dark, save for the flashlight's beam. I pressed upward, past a door hanging ajar. The bedroom beyond was empty, bed stripped bare and mattress stained. On the floor, I spotted a slipper, one child's size, matted with mud. Footprints matched it, 2 small prints beside 2 larger ones. I paused, listening. The rain had eased back to a soft patter, the only sound besides the creak of my boots. The open phone line still transmitted all of this. I could hear my own breathing in the ear of my headset. I reached the end of the hall and found another closed door. The knob was warm, recently touched. I placed my palm against it, felt the heat dissipate. Inside was darkness. I clicked on my flashlight, stepping in. The beam landed on a desk, scattered with scribbled pages. Each bore the same single word, written in shaky handwriting. Help. Repeated on every sheet. Some were crumpled, shoved under papers, as though whoever wrote it was trying to hide them. I ran my fingers over one sheet, traced the loop of the H. The paper was damp, edges curling. I stood and swept the room again. Bedroom, closet, window frame. At the far corner, a closet door stood open. Inside was nothing but a small pile of children's toys and a radio. A handheld police scanner set to a frequency I recognized. Odd. I pressed the power button. It crackled to life, channeling voices from dispatch centers across the county. Then the channel shifted to static. Then a whisper. The faint outline of a child's voice. So soft, I thought I imagined it. I adjusted the dial. The voice, young, trembling, came through again. Please! It cut off like someone yanked the cord. The scanner clicked silent. My pulse quickened. I snapped the scanner off and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Back in the hallway, the open phone line still breathed in my ear. I hadn't heard the line drop. The dispatcher was silent. Too silent. I clicked the mic. Dispatch, do you copy? Nothing but static. Then I heard it. A soft shuffle from below, like someone brushing against the wall. I spun around. The corridor was empty, the bathroom door ajar. Water droplets glistened on the tile floor as the faucet dripped. I stepped toward it. The bathroom mirror was fogged, except for 2 small handprints pressed against the glass from the inside. I lifted my flashlight beam. The prints were tiny, child-sized. Above them, someone had written in the condensation, in the same shaky script as the pages, "I'm here." My gut clenched. I backed out of the bathroom, retraced my steps. The footprints returned, leading back toward the stairs. I radioed again. Unit 4-Delta. I need backup. Possible victim in the house. Small child. My voice cracked. The line went dead, The only response the low hum of the street lamp and the drip of that faucet. I looked back down the hallway and saw a flicker, a shadow moving across the wall, just at the edge of the flashlight glow. I lifted my hand, steadied my breath, and called out, "This is Officer Warren. Come out with your hands visible." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. No answer, no footstep, just the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Then, from behind me, a soft, stifled sob. I whirled. The stairs were empty. The living room beyond was dark. The only thing I saw was the teddy bear, half buried under the armchair, its fur matted with rainwater and something darker. I approached slowly. It clutched a torn piece of paper in its paw. I knelt and flattened it against the floor. In neat, childish letters, "Why did you leave?" My radio crackled until nothing. The static blanketed me in that house, sealing me away from the world outside. I realized then the line was still open, still feeding every whisper, every heartbeat back to dispatch. I took the paper into my glove, stood, and stepped back toward the stairs. Halfway down, I froze. From the darkness above came a single, breathy whisper, so close it felt like cold lips at my neck. "Don't go." And then the footsteps started again, soft, dragging down, inching closer. I swallowed hard, and everything went still. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady patter that turned the streets of Ridgevale into slick ribbons of black glass. I sat in my cruiser with the engine off, curtain of water streaming down the windshield, listening to the open line. No caller ID, just the raw wah-wah of an open mic, and the soft exhalations of someone, no one, for reasons I couldn't yet explain. Dispatcher patched me through, but there was no voice on the other end, only breath. A measured, deliberate inhale, and then the click of a mouthpiece just before the line went silent. I slipped on my jacket, weight of the holster settling against my hip like an anchor. Gloves on, I stepped into the deluge, boots sloshing through shallow puddles. The cruiser's dome light cast a pale glow over the cracked sidewalk. I crossed the street toward 423 Willowbend Drive, coordinates that pinged on my GPS as I rolled through blinker and siren off. No urgency from dispatch, this was a hang-up, routine in its own way, but the unease in my gut said it was anything but routine tonight. House 423 was a two-story frame built in the 1930s. Clapboard siding rotted in places, shuttered windows dark. Porch light flickered on and off like a dying pulse. I raised my voice, low, steady. "Ridgevale PD, Officer Hale. Anyone home?" No answer. Wind tugged at my collar, and the open phone line in my ear buzzed with static. I knocked on the door twice. The door swung open under my palm, unlocked, felt wrong, felt too easy. I radioed in. "Unit on scene, house is open." Silence from dispatch. Flashlight beam cut through the entryway. Wallpaper bubbled, paint peeling in strips. A lone umbrella lay by the coat rack, dripping red-brown water onto the floorboards. Footprints, barely visible, marred the carpet, leading toward the living room. I followed, sensitive to every creak beneath my boots. The room was empty, except for an overturned chair and a lamp lying on its side, shade torn. The TV screen still glowed, frozen on a late-night infomercial. I sighed. Someone had been here recently. Whether they left in a hurry or planned to return, I couldn't tell. In the corner, a coffee table held scattered mail. Bills, advertisements, a photograph face down. I flipped it over. A family portrait. Two parents, a boy, maybe 8 years old, and a girl, perhaps 5, all smiling under the midday sun. The frame was cracked but intact. I gently placed it back, careful not to smudge the glass. Something about that photo felt like a key, but to what, I didn't know. Hallway beyond showed a staircase ascending into darkness. I paused, ear pressed to the doorframe, but heard only the rain and my own heartbeat. I climbed, each step groaning under my weight. At the top, the hallway branched left and right. To my right, a bedroom door stood ajar. Beyond it, the soft glow of a nightlight, pink, shaped like a cartoon unicorn, bathed the walls in a sickly glow. I approached. The door creaked as I nudged it open, and my light revealed a small bed torn apart. Sheets in clumps, pillow ripped open, foam spilling onto the floor. No sign of its occupant. On the mattress, a single sneaker lay on its side, its laces undone. I swallowed hard, scanned the room. Closet door swung, empty hangers clinking. On the dresser, a half-empty glass of water sat, beads of condensation running down its side. It looked normal, an everyday scene, but something about its ordinariness made my skin crawl. I bent down to inspect the water. A smudge of lipstick along the rim faded to a dull pink. I wiped it with my glove and carried the scent, faint vanilla, and something metallic beneath it. Blood? I couldn't tell. I backed out of the room, heart pounding. The hallway light flickered overhead. I turned, toward the other door, parents' bedroom. It was closed, knob warm to the touch. I hesitated. My hand hovered. The phone line still open, static, breath, nothing. I called out softly, "Anyone here?" "This is Officer Hale." My voice echoed. The knob clicked. The door rolled open on its own, as if nudged by an invisible hand. I froze, training the beam inside. The bed was pristine, made up with crisp sheets. On the nightstand lay a cell phone, screen cracked, lit up by a missed call notification. 3 missed calls. Same number, each labeled unknown. I heard a muffled click behind me, turned. The hallway was empty, but footprints, small, bare, led from the doorway back toward the stairs. Fresh impressions in the dust, damp in the center. A child's? Too small to be the boy in the photo. The prints paused at the top step, then petered out. I stared at the railing, glossy with moisture from the storm seeping through a broken skylight somewhere above. My radio buzzed. "Unit 4, Bravo, respond to..." But the rest was gone, swallowed by static. I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, I'm at 423 Willowbend. Found signs of occupancy, possible juvenile involved." Silence. Then a faint whisper at the bottom of the stairs, just beyond where my light reached. So soft I nearly thought it was the wind. But it formed words. "Please, don't leave." Then harder, louder. "Help me." The voice trembled, childish. My pulse hit my throat. I swallowed. The knot in my gut tightened. I steadied my flashlight, pointed it down the stairs. The bottom was shrouded in darkness. The paint chipped on each riser like worn teeth. I took a slow step forward. The whisper repeated, closer now, as if someone hovered just out of view. I said, "I'm here." "Stay calm." Breath rattled in my earpiece. I clicked the mic again. "Dispatch, urgent," child's voice in the house, requesting immediate assistance. My words hung between the walls. Then the voice changed. Older, urgent. "He's here." A rush of air hit my back like someone brushing past. I spun, light swinging, catching nothing but empty hallway. Door at the end of the hall, bathroom, stood open. Steam billowed from inside, windows steamed up. I moved toward it. My boots slipped on wet tile. The bathroom light was off. My beam showed a mirror soaked in condensation. Someone had written on it, "Look closer." Underneath, 2 sets of fingerprints, one small, one larger, pressed into the glass. My breath caught. I reached out, traced the letters with a fingertip. The message stung, the warning obvious, the threat implicit. Behind me, the hallway light flickered again. I flicked my beam back and saw a pair of eyes reflected in the bathroom window, wide, shining, staring. I jerked around, empty. I clicked my radio mic frantically. "Dispatch, I see someone. Need backup now." Static. The engine of the cruiser hummed through the walls, distant. My own heartbeat pounded in my ears. I shone the beam down the hallway. Nothing moved. The whispers were gone. But the mirror still glowed with its message. I felt a tremor run down my spine, warm, like a breath at the nape of my neck. And then the child's voice, directly behind me, whispered in my ear, "Find me." The hallway lay quiet for a heartbeat that felt like an accusation. The mirror's message, "Look closer," burning behind my eyes. I swallowed hard, palms slick inside my gloves, and forced my legs to move. Down the hall, the front door stood wide open, rain sluicing in beyond the threshold like a dark promise. I flicked off the flashlight and listened. Only the rain and the hollow thump of my own heartbeat. Yet my instinct screamed that I was not alone. I reached the living room and crouched by the coffee table. The family photograph still lay face up now, as though someone had righted it. The boy's eyes, sharp, alive, seemed to watch me. I touched the frame's edge. It shuddered, like settling in an aftershock. I stood and peered toward the entryway. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the room in harsh, white light. In that flash, I thought I saw movement. A blur of something small darting past the window, but the next instant it was gone. My radio crackled. "4 Bravo, are you still there?" The dispatcher's voice trembled with static and concern. I keyed the mic. "Yes, stand by. I'm checking the perimeter." I slipped outside, flashlight off, letting the ambient stormlight guide me. The porch boards were slick. I moved slowly, careful of the spongy wood beneath my boots. I crossed the yard to the side of the house and came upon a narrow path leading to the backyard, a worn trail through overgrown grass. Along the path, small footprints in the mud matched the ones upstairs. I traced them with the tip of my boot, child-sized, barefoot, trailing off into the darkness beyond the back fence. I shone the light at the fence. It was chain link, rusted, sagging. The footprints disappeared where the grass met the gravel drive. I flipped on the flashlight and scanned left and right. Nothing but shadow and the skeletal outline of an old oak tree, its branches whipping in the wind. I called into the darkness, voice low, "Show yourself." "I just want to help." Silence answered, punctuated by the distant rumble of thunder. I turned to re-enter the house, but a sudden rustle from behind me made me freeze. I spun, light darting across the yard, catching only rain and the dark silhouette of the house. The rustle came again, softer, closer, beneath the oak. I stepped toward it. The gravel crunched underfoot. I flashed the beam at the tree trunk. Halfway up, carved into the bark, were initials, EB plus MW. Underneath, scratched roughly into the wood, "Never forget." My mind raced. EB? The boy in the photo was Evan Bellamy. His initials fit. But who was MW? And what was he never to forget? A flash of dread coursed through me. I bent down and touched the carving. The grooves were fresh, wood still damp. I looked up just in time to see something drop from a branch. A small tattered notebook bound in leather, pages swelling with moisture. It struck the ground and lay open, waterlogged. I grabbed it, flipped through pages jammed with scribbled entries, times, dates, places around the neighborhood, coordinates. But on the topmost page, clear despite the rain, was an entry scrawled in a child's hand. May 12th, 2:47 a.m. He watches me when I sleep. My breath caught. The page below bore a hastily drawn map of a bedroom layout. Furniture sketched in pencil, a small X marking the spot by the closet. That matched the room upstairs where the nightlight had burned and the sneaker lay. I felt bile rise in my throat. Someone, or something, was mapping this child's life in real time. Lightning flashed again. I squinted at the sky, gauging the distance to the storm. I needed to get inside and secure the house before something, or someone, got to that child first. I slipped back through the side door and moved swiftly to the staircase. My boots slapped on the wood with purpose now. The mail lay scattered on the living room floor. I leapt the pile, not caring if it fluttered behind me. Rainwater had trickled in, pooling at the threshold. I ignored it, focused on the stairs. Ascending, I clutched the notebook under my arm, its weight like a living thing. At the top, the hallway was darker than before, the nightlight's glow extinguished. I fumbled for the panel switch and clicked it on. A dim bulb flickered in the center of the ceiling, casting weak light. I moved to the child's bedroom door and pushed it open. The air inside was musty, still, too still. The bed lay in tatters. The closet door swung shut. I quickly approached, hand on the doorframe, and whispered the child's name. "Evan?" The word was my tether, my purpose. No answer, only my own breath in my ears. I slid the notebook onto the bed and flipped to the last entry. It read, "He comes for me tonight. I'm hiding." My heart pounded. I shone my flashlight on the closet door. Its handle was scratched, the wood around the latch splintered. The door stood slightly ajar. I inhaled and forced myself forward. My hand tightened on my flashlight, and as I nudged the door open, the air stank of something metallic. Rust, old blood, decay. Inside, folded neatly on a shelf, was a small blanket stained dark. Underneath, a soft whimper, the sound of a child. Relief flooded me, quickly replaced by a fresh rush of dread. I knelt and called out gently, "Evan, it's Officer Hale. I've got you." The whimper turned into a frightened sob. I reached into the closet and lifted a small body into my arms. The boy was no more than 8, slim, shirt clinging to his ribs, eyes wide and glassy. He trembled like a leaf in a gale. I locked eyes with him. His lips quivered as he whispered, "He's outside." Fear lanced through me. Who was he? Who had taken this child? I scooped Evan into my arms and turned to leave, but a heavy thud slammed into the door behind me. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. The door rattled on its hinges. I leveled the light at the frame. There, perched like a wraith, stood a man, tall, gaunt, features hidden by a soaked hood. His eyes glinted in the flashlight glow, unblinking. My breath froze. "Let him go," I said, voice low and controlled, despite the fear knotting my stomach. The man said nothing, just tilted his head, studying us. Evan whimpered, curling into my jacket. My free hand moved to my radio, but no signal came. Still dead. The man raised a gloved hand and tapped twice on his chest, then pointed downward. Then he turned and stepped away, merging with the dark hallway. I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the staircase, carrying Evan down 3 steps at a time. At the bottom, I paused in the living room, scanning for the stranger. The front door stood open, rain swirling in its frame like a portal. I dared a last look up the stairs. The man stood on the landing, a silent sentinel in the storm. The front porch light cast his shadow long, across the floorboards. Then a clap of thunder, and he was gone. I didn't waste time. I barreled through the doorway, son's sobs muffled against my chest, and sprinted through the yard to my cruiser. I yanked the door open, shoved Evan onto the passenger seat and slammed it shut. Heart hammering, I slid behind the wheel, pulled the notebook and the family photo from my pocket, and dialed dispatch on the cruiser radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Bravo. I have the child in custody. Send medical and backup to 423 Willow Bend Drive now. Priority. The static cleared for a moment. Then, copy that, 4 Bravo. Backup en route. I grabbed a blanket from the back seat and wrapped Evan in it, pressing him close. He shivered, eyes still wide, and mumbled, "He's coming back." I forced a reassuring tone I didn't feel. "You're safe now," I said, though the words tasted hollow. I held the notebook open on my lap, entries scrawled in that trembling handwriting. Maps, schedules, chilling declarations of intent. Behind me, sirens wailed, a distant soundtrack to the rain's relentless rhythm. I glanced back toward the house. That dark shape of the porch, the broken skylight above, felt like a wound waiting to bleed again. I clicked off the flashlight and leaned back in the seat, eyes never leaving Willow Bend's soggy lines of trees and shadows. I didn't ask how the stranger knew where to hide, or why he carved those initials into the oak, or what he wanted from a frightened boy. I only knew that some things in this life defied explanation, and tonight they had nearly broken me. The first patrol cars arrived, lights painting the wet street in red and blue. I lowered my window as the paramedics climbed out, bathing Evan in their gentle questions. I handed over the notebook and the photograph, voice hoarse as I explained. Through the blur of rain and rotation of lights, I saw the oak tree, its initials still visible in the fading glow. And I knew with a sinking certainty that this wasn't over. Because out there in the storm's heart, someone had watched every moment, plotted every step, and vanished into the night, only to return. And the question that burned in my mind, louder than the sirens, was the one Evan's voice whispered before I found him. Who was keeping watch when we weren't? I dropped Evan into the back seat and sat behind the wheel, the cruiser's interior lit by the revolving blues and reds of the arriving units. His small frame trembled against the damp blanket I'd wrapped around him. He stared out the rear window at the house disappearing into darkness, eyes hollow with fear. I took a breath, tried to steady my voice before I radioed dispatch one more time. Dispatch, this is 4 Bravo. The child is safe, but I need a unit to stay with him. I'm heading back inside for evidence. No sooner had I keyed off than Officer Delgado nudged the driver's door open. His flashlight beam swept the yard before settling on my face. "You all right, Hale?" His tone was low, professional concern, but also curiosity. I nodded, mouth dry. I need to get those pages inside, see if there's anything else. I lifted the soaked notebook from my lap and tucked it into the inner pocket of my raincoat. He looked from the notebook to the open door of the house. "Be careful," he said, and I managed a wry half-smile. Inside, the rain pattered through the broken skylight, pooling on the hardwood where the staircase landed. The front door had been closed by backup, but the latch was brittle, easily forced. I hesitated at the threshold, glanced at the swirling water on the floorboards, then pressed forward. Each step sounded loud in my chest. The living room felt empty, but I could still feel the weight of that stranger's gaze from upstairs. I grabbed my flashlight, swept the beam across the walls. Now that the household was evacuated, the house seemed to sag under its own secrets. I headed straight for the stairs, noting anew the damp footprints trailing up each riser. At the top, the hallway light had failed, bulb blown. I clicked it on and the corridor flickered into view. The child's bedroom door stood closed, a thin crack of light shimmering under its bottom edge. I approached and pushed it open. Inside, the closet was stripped bare, No blanket, no whimpering child. Evan was gone. My heart stopped for a moment. I rushed forward, checked beneath the bed. Empty, under the mattress. Nothing. On the dresser, the lighted unicorn nightlight blinked twice and died. I snatched it, held its base to see its batteries, then dropped it in disgust. Whoever carved those initials in the oak had access to the child's bed, his blanket. They'd known exactly where to look, how to lull him into hiding. I pounded out the door and scanned the hallway. The parents' bedroom door stood open, soft lamplight spilling out. I swept inside. The cell phone lay on the nightstand, screen shattered, and I heard a faint vibration. I looked closer, a voicemail indicator blinking. I nearly missed it. Hard to see in the gloom. I pressed play. A crackle of static, then a child's voice, distant but unmistakable. "Officer Hale, help!" It cut off. I replayed it. The same plea, only 4 seconds long. Then silence. My stomach clenched. It wasn't Evan's voice on that message. It was another child, younger, male, a whisper buried in the digital static. I stared at the phone as if it might speak again. Behind me, the radio hissed. 4, Bravo, you copy? Backups at the front door. I keyed back. Copy, evidence bagged, 1 voicemail, sounds like another child. I'm checking the rest of the house. I hustled into the bathroom at the end of the hall. The condensation message, "Look closer," had been wiped away, but the mirror still bore smudges. I pressed a gloved finger against the glass and found a faint fingerprint. Adult-sized, smeared. I lifted the mirror off its mount, pried it from the wall. Behind it was a small hidden cavity carved into the plaster, just large enough for a young child's body or a handful of papers. I peered inside. A folded photograph, faded and yellowed. I retrieved it and unfolded it. A black and white image of a family, mother, father, and 2 children, standing in front of a farmhouse that looked decades old. Scrawled on the back in neat handwriting, "The McAllister daughters, missing 1978. I staggered back. A chill that wasn't from the rain crept up my spine. The McAllister missing persons case had haunted this precinct for years. 2 little girls vanished from their own home, never seen again. No suspects, no clues, just empty beds and broken hearts. The date stitched through this photograph put me face to face with history. Someone had hidden this in a child's bathroom, waiting for me to find it. I slipped the photo into an evidence bag and rose, mind racing. The voicemail, the notebook entries, the carving in the oak. It wasn't just Evan who was in danger. This house held the imprint of an older crime, too. And somehow, the same person. I turned and fled the hallway, footsteps echoing. At the staircase landing, I paused. Officer Delgado stood just out of sight, flashlight trained on the base of the stairs. "You okay?" he asked, silent concern in his eyes. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. I only pointed with my chin toward the bathroom door. He flattened me with his gaze but didn't push. Instead, he called for Detective Jones on the radio. Her specialty was cold cases, missing persons. I watched his back as he retraced my steps upstairs. I waited in the foyer, breath ragged, until Jones's car crept past the cruisers outside and she stepped onto the porch. A blue flashlight beam cut through the sheets of rain. She nodded once and followed Delgado inside. I remained in the foyer, mind replaying the voicemail and that photograph. The unanswered question whispered through the house. Who had watched Evan? Who had mapped his every move? And why resurrect an old tragedy alongside a new one? I crossed to the front door and closed it against the storm. The bolt slid home with a click that sounded final, but nothing felt resolved. Through the rain-streaked glass, I saw Delgado's silhouette moving toward the child's bedroom, and Jones kneeling by the bathroom cavity, hands trembling as she examined the plaster. I stepped back, radio in hand. Dispatch, 4 Bravo. I need that list from records on the McAllister case. Every file, every interview, every unturned stone. I've got a fresh victim and an old crime mapped into the same walls. My voice crackled over the static. The dispatcher's reply was muffled but clear. Copy that. We're pulling the files now. I exhaled, shoulders sagging, and turned to look at the house again. The rain had eased to a drizzle, porch light flickering in the dusk. I felt the weight of every unanswered question settle on me like a shroud. The storm outside had passed, but the storm in my head raged still. I glanced at the photo of the missing sisters, now sealed in that evidence bag. The snow-white lines of the farmhouse in the background looked eerily like the shape of this very Ridgevale home. A cold certainty settled. We were standing on the same ground. And somewhere inside, a watcher waited, smiles hidden beneath a hood, knowing I had found their secret. I savored a hollow breath. Then I keyed the mic. Detective Jones, I'm ready whenever you are. The only answer was the soft drip of water from a loose gutter and the distant hum of the precinct's lights. Behind us, in the darkened window of the bathroom, I thought I saw, just for a heartbeat, a pair of small eyes watching my back. And the question roared in my mind, who had hidden there long enough to know I would come searching? The house settled around me like a living thing, each creak and whisper drawing breath from the walls. I stood in the foyer, rain-slicked boots still damp, and let the weight of what we'd uncovered press into my chest. A concealed child's closet, mapped, a decades-old photograph linking past and present, and a caller's breath on an open line. All converged in this place. Detective Jones's voice drifted down the hallway as she conferred in a low tone with Officer Delgado, their words muffled behind closed doors. I tucked the evidence bag against my side and moved toward the stairs, every step deliberate, mindful not to erase more footprints in the damp dust. The staircase landing was dim, the single overhead bulb flickering. I paused at the top, fingertips brushing the banister, cool wood mottled with age and moisture. Below, the living room lay in shadow. Above, the hallway stretched toward the child's bedroom and beyond. I clenched my jaw, steeling myself to continue the search. Each room we'd checked held fragments of a fractured story, the tattered blanket hiding Evan, the voicemail from another child, the hidden photograph of the McAllister sisters. But there was more here, something deeper. A pulse in the floorboards that thrummed beneath my boots. An unanswered question that turned in my gut. I stepped into the child's bedroom first. It was empty now. No evidence remained, but the nightlight's cracked plastic unicorn on the dresser and the defeated heap of mattress stuffing in the corner. I ran my glove over the scorch of damp foam, then turned to the window. The glass was smeared with fingerprints. Adult-sized and child-sized overlapped in a chaotic pattern. Outside, beyond the pane, storms had battered the world into dark water. I clicked on my flashlight and swept it across the yard. A figure peered from behind a tree line, just for a moment. A pale shape that vanished as soon as I blinked. My breath caught. I radioed in, but only static answered. I lowered the beam and focused on the footprints trailing across the sill. 2 small prints that likely clung to bare feet. Whoever had been here moved silently, slipped from room to room without permission, without friction. My skin prickled. I left the bedroom and moved down the hall toward the bathroom. With the mirror removed, the cavity in the wall gaped like a wound. Detective Jones knelt before it, swabbing at the edges with a gloved finger. She looked up at me, eyes dark with exhilaration and dread. "We've got hair fibers, possibly canine, possibly synthetic. I'm sending these to the lab." She held up a small evidence bag with strands of hair that glowed in the flashlight's glare. "But that photograph, this is the same house. The McAllister disappearance happened right here." She shook her head. "They moved out after the case went cold, left everything behind. No one's lived here until this week." Her voice was low, furrowed with shock. I slid the door closed behind me and pressed my shoulder against the frame, leaning into the cool wood. If no one lived here, then who had set up camp in the walls? Who had been lying in wait? I traced my flashlight beam along the hallway walls, scuff marks at elbow height, as if someone had crept along brushing fingertips against the plaster. A faint line of mold traced around one section where moisture had seeped through, right at the height of those scuff marks. I dropped to my knees and examined the baseboard. A loose panel, one nail rusted through. I pried at it gently. The wood shifted, revealing a narrow slot lined with tape residue. I stood and beckoned Jones over. She shone her light onto the opening. "A crawl space," she breathed, unease curling her words. "Just big enough for a small person to slip through." I glanced at her, half expecting denial, half expecting confirmation. She met my eyes and nodded. I slid my flashlight further in. Damp wood, peeling wallpaper on the inner walls, a faint stench of mildew and old decay. My light caught something pale, half buried in the mud below. A piece of torn clothing, faded now, but once bright. I reached in and retrieved it. A fragment of pink fabric edged with lace, likely the hem of a little girl's dress. My heart lurched. This was beyond one missing boy. This was a child, maybe more, hidden inside these walls, left to learn the rhythms of a house like a prisoner. I rose, turning toward the stairs. The ceiling above the crawl space bore the faint outline of peeling paint, patches where moisture had seeped through for decades. I traced it with my eyes and saw letters scrawled, "I watch." They were nearly gone, rendered invisible by time, but enough remained to chill me. Step by step, I descended back to the living room, the notebook pressing cold against my side. Out here, the world was still storm-swept and wild. In here, it was a tomb for secrets. I reached for the photograph of the farmhouse, the McAllister family standing on the porch under a noontime sun, and compared it with the front of this house. The roofline nearly matched, the wide front porch with its two fluted pillars identical. The clapboard siding in the photo was fresh and white. Here, it was weathered and gray. It was unmistakably the same structure, only decades older. I called out, voice tight, "Delgado, Jones, down here." They appeared at the base of the stairs, torches angled upward. I motioned to the floors, to the walls. This whole house, every room, served as a prison for someone. Those McAllister girls, Evan, whoever called 911 tonight, they've all been part of the same nightmare. Officer Delgado's face paled. So whoever's doing this, they're obsessed. Obsessed with families, children, this house itself. Detective Jones ran a hand through her hair, and tonight they've resurfaced. She knelt to examine the floor where the panel had been pried. If they used this crawl space, they could be anywhere right now, watching us. I felt a crucible of fear forge between my ribs. I radioed dispatch. "Units, secure the perimeter. No one enters or exits this house without my permission. Treat this as an act of abduction." Static churned on the line, but I heard acknowledgement. Outside, backup cars formed a ring of light against the dark. I glanced back at the wall cavity, an aperture into a hidden world carved beneath these floors. I realized then that this place knew my steps as well as its own breaking boards. Whoever it was, they had molded the house to their cruelty, learned its secret hum, and remained invisible. I raised my flashlight to the ceiling beams. Shadows skittered across the boards. My pulse drummed. I swallowed against the bile in my throat. This house had become a predator, waiting patiently to strike again. And I knew with crystalline clarity what I had to do. I tapped Delgado on the shoulder. Ready to search inside? Methodically, room by room, no corner unturned. He squared his shoulders. Let's do it. Detective Jones looked at us both, eyes narrow. We should have the files on the McAllister case soon. That history might show us where to look first. I nodded. Agreed, but for now, we start here. We find every hidden cavity, every covered vent, every false panel. I turned toward the hallway, the beam of my flashlight cutting a path through the gloom. Each room beyond held fresh evidence. Muddy footprints, half-erased messages, soaked clothing scraps. And within these walls, behind closed doors, lay the promise of answers and the threat of more victims. We stepped forward in unison, officers bound by duty and dread, plunging into a case that blurred the line between past and present, light and shadow, hunter and prey. And somewhere behind us, in the black heart of the crawlspace, a whisper curled through the dark. I've been waiting. I press my flashlight against the hallway wall and feel the damp plaster give slightly under my palm. Another hidden cavity, another potential hiding place. I tap on the surface, hollow. My breath hitches. Whoever prepared this house knew exactly where to conceal a child, a body, evidence. I signal Delgado, who retrieves a small pry bar from his belt. We work in unison, prying away the loose panel to expose a narrow crawl space behind it. The gap is just wide enough to admit a small child or a lean adult crouched low. Inside, the stale air presses against us, thick with mold and dust. I shine my flashlight in first, scanning the confined dimensions. Patched wallpaper matching the outer room, faint footprints in the mud along the floor, and, at the far end, a child's torn blanket snagged on a protruding nail. I slip inside, body half submerged in the cavity. The roof is low. I crawl forward, the notebook and evidence bag clutched to my chest. Delgado follows, a flashlight beam bobbing ahead. We advance past the blanket, past more childish scrawls on the inner wall. He finds us, over and over, scratched with a blunt object. My heart thuds as I see fresh stains on the floorboards, dark and sticky. I crouch, examine them. Blood. Not dry, but set enough to leave a faint crust. Delgado shines his light further in. At the very end, the space widens slightly, a hidden alcove. I shine my beam into the alcove and find a small makeshift bunk, a thin mattress, stained, a plastic cup, a half-eaten granola bar. Nearby, a scribbled message on the wall. They're coming, written in what looks like the same child's handwriting as the notebook entries. My throat burns. I clear my mind and radio out. Dispatch. Evidence found in concealed crawlspace. Bedding, food wrappers, blood. Need emergency medical and forensics. Possible recent occupancy. The static crackles approval. I radio again to Jones and Delgado, listening outside. We've got to get this child out. No telling how long he's been here. Delgado nods, moving to shine his light on the mattress. I lift the blanket. Nothing. I pull the mattress aside and feel a hollow in the floor beneath it like a trapdoor. My gut twists. I brace my arms on the floorboards, testing for weakness, and press downward. The boards give, and with a splintering crack, a rectangular hatch swings inward. I catch my breath and shine the light down. A dark shaft descending further into the earth. The smell that rises up is fetid, damp soil, rot, something fouler. I hesitate. This is beyond anything I've prepared for, but the image of Evan's frightened eyes steals me. I radio in. Unit 4. Bravo to dispatch. We've discovered a secondary subfloor hatch beneath the concealed crawl space. Shaft leads downward. Unknown depth. Request immediate SWAT and medical response. Bravo out. The line goes silent, but for the low hum of wind through the gaps. I grip the edge of the hatch and lower myself in. Delgado pressing his boot against my back to steady me. Inside, the shaft walls are lined with roughly hewn timbers. Metal rungs embedded serve as a makeshift ladder. I slide down carefully, rungs slick beneath my gloves. 10 feet down, I reach a platform. A dirt floor matted with roots and refuse. I find my flashlight beam sucks in darkness beyond the immediate radius. I call up, "I'm down. Looks like a subterranean chamber." Delgado's voice crackles back, "Proceed with caution." I step forward onto the muddy ground, boots squelching. The chamber is roughly hewn, like a basement but smaller, maybe 8 by 10 feet. The low ceiling forces me to stoop. In the center, a cluster of objects lies. A child's doll missing one eye, its dress filthy, a drawstring bag containing crumpled photos, an old radio, its speaker torn open, and, strung across the far wall, dozens of Polaroid photographs pinned by thumbtacks. My flashlight beam flicks across them. Pictures of children. Faces frozen in smiles and tears, taken in living rooms, bedrooms, front porches. Some are labeled on the back, dates ranging over decades, locations across multiple states. I feel bile rise in my throat. Delgado descends behind me, flashlight on the doll. "Jesus Christ," he breathes. "This isn't just Ridgevale, it's a network." He glances at the Polaroids. He's been collecting them for years. I kneel by the photos, examining one pinned in the center. 2 young girls in a kitchen, identical twins. The caption reads, "McAllister Sisters, Ridgevale, May 1978. Next to it, a new photo, grainy but recent, shows Evan asleep in the closet, taken from above. My heart plummets. I look at the radio. It's the same model as the scanner from the Stanton house. I tap it. It hums to life, crackling static. I twist the dial. Various frequencies keyed to emergency channels. It might let us monitor suspect communications underground, anticipating his next move. I snap several photos with my phone for evidence, mindful to avoid destroying anything. Each image is a damning confession, a map of a criminal mind. I place the radio in my pocket and reach to open the drawstring bag. Inside lie faded family snapshots, police IDs, keys, house plans, documents too intimate to ignore. I sift through them, heart racing. A folded note slips free, scrawled in pencil. He sees everything. We belong to him. I swallow hard and stand, risking a glance upward. The ladder rungs are directly above. Delgado is already climbing. "Box this up," I say, voice hollow. He moves carefully, gathering artifacts into evidence bags I drop down. I secure the photos, the doll, the bag, and the radio. I fasten one last plastic tag onto the hatch frame. Evidence, subfloor chamber. Then I climb out, feeling the weight of decades of violence on my shoulders. Back in the crawl space, I slide out onto the floor behind Delgado. We wrestle the evidence up through the panel opening in silence. I close the hatch, replace the panel, and seal it with tape, though now I know it's only a temporary barrier. Dixon's team will bring in forensics to document the chamber. I radio dispatch, chamber secured. Evacuate house, child is safe. Suspect at large, he's been here all along. The static buzz replies, "Copy for Bravo." I emerge from the house into the early dawn light, the storm finally spent. SWAT teams form a cordon. Medical crews tend to Evan, and the McAllister files are on their way. I watch the rising sun burn through gray clouds, painting the yard gold. I feel no relief, only the hollow echo of every photo in that chamber, every lost child face staring back at me. I grip the photograph of the missing sisters and tuck it into my chest, feeling the ragged edges. My voice is raw when I radio the precinct. All units, this is now a nationwide investigation. Notify the FBI. We need every detective on this case. Tell them Ridgevale is ground zero. As the teams sweep the house and cordon the property, I step to the curb and light a cigarette, drawing deep. The smoke curls into the cool air. I close my eyes and remember the breath on the handset, the silent calls that bridge decades of fear. And I know the final, terrible truth. He wasn't just hiding in the walls. He was hiding in our history, and now, at last, we've found him. The beam of my flashlight cut a narrow swath through the gathering gloom of the crawlspace panel, but the evidence I'd retrieved, doll, photographs, notebook, radio, had woven a tapestry of terror that no single light could dispel. As Delgado sealed the final panel shut, I felt the weight of history press in on me. Every vanished child, every unanswered call, every breath on an open line had converged here. I stepped back into the hallway, the lamplight flickering overhead like a nervous eye. Officer Delgado and Detective Jones flanked me silently, their faces drawn tight with the same questions that pulsed through my mind. We had nearly recovered Evan in time, but the chamber beneath the house whispered of victims we had not yet found, and of a man who had studied this house as one studies a map. My radio crackled. All units proceed with search, secure the house, forensics team en route, SWAT staging perimeter. The dispatcher's voice was curt, professional, but I heard the undercurrent of something that wasn't just urgency. It was dread. I took a deep breath and turned to Jones. Let's circle back to the stairwell. There was evidence of more scuff marks, another panel, maybe higher up. He hid everywhere. We moved together deeper into the house. In the living room, furniture had been shifted by forensics, white sheets marking disrupted evidence. Jones crouched beside the fireplace hearth, brushing at a charred spot on the soot-black bricks. "Burn marks," she said, voice low. "Looks recent, like someone tried to torch this room from the inside." She held up a clump of ash. "Matches the residue we found in Stanton's bedroom. A little sooty, petroleum-based." I nodded, heart pounding. The arson attempt had been subtle, nearly invisible, just enough to scorch without igniting. He wanted to distract us, confuse us, buy time. Delgado joined us, shining his flashlight on the mantel. There, carved into the wood in sloppy letters, "You found me." Beneath, a date, today's date, in crude scrawl. Not just a message, it was a challenge. My pulse hammered in my ears. I spoke softly. "He's daring us to follow, wants us to think he'll surface. But he's still underground." I could feel the adrenaline sharpening my senses. Every drip of water from the broken skylight, every distant siren sounded like a countdown. We backed out of the living room and headed up the staircase toward the parents' bedroom. The door stood open, police tape fluttering like a white flag in the draft. Inside, photographs and evidence bags covered the bed. A canvas bag hung from the closet knob, its clasp brittle. I shook it free and unzipped it. Inside lay a small battered tape recorder and a stack of audio reels. I frowned. This was new. "He's been documenting this," I said, turning the recorder over in my hand. "Listening to our voices through the scanner, recording our communications." Jones pressed her ear to the speaker. The recorder clicked, word, and then a child's voice, distant, staticky. "Help. Me, please. The pitch was muffled but unmistakable. My stomach roiled. Who else had he trapped here? Or was he taunting us with the memory of other children's voices? Delgado dropped his voice to a whisper. He's playing with us, using our language, our voices against us. I slipped the recorder into an evidence bag and sealed it. We need to find his lair, and fast. He's watching every room in this house. I tapped my temple. He knows our signals, our codes. We're the prey in his domain. We pressed on, clearing each room at a gallop. The back hallway led to a side entrance where the floor was slick with muddy water. Footprints, both adult and child, led down a narrow corridor toward the basement stairs. The basement door was heavier than I expected, reinforced with a deadbolt. I knocked, once, twice, and waited. No answer. Then I hefted my shoulder against it and forced it open. My light revealed a dingy staircase descending into raw stone walls. At the bottom, a single bare bulb swayed, its flicker revealing a long corridor lined with closed doors. I radioed the command post. 4 Bravo, basement corridor, multiple locked rooms, request breach team. My words echoed off the concrete. The hallway was a gallery of warped shadows, each closed door a question. I approached the first door. It was unlocked. Inside was empty but for a wooden barrel. I pried off the lid. Inside lay strands of hair, clumps of cloth, fragments of children's toys. Evidence of past prisoners, Delgado murmured. I moved door to door, cataloging horrors. A room with a single cot, its mattress flattened. Another with a chalk outline of a small handprint on the far wall. One with a child's shoe perched atop a metal sink. Each room held only the residue of suffering. No bodies, only the taunts of absence. At the last door, the latch was sealed with duct tape. I tore it away. Inside was darkness so complete I could barely see. I clicked on the flashlight and swept the beam. The walls were covered in scrawled messages, names of children, dates they'd gone missing, and a single sentence repeated over and over. They belong to me. My voice caught. He's cataloged his trophies. The corridor stretched beyond, descending further into shadow. A hum of machinery drifted up. A generator, perhaps, pumping stale air through vents. He'd built this place meticulously, layer by layer, extending from a secret panel into a full subterranean prison. I radioed again. SWAT team. Prepare to breach at corridor end. Caution, possibly booby-trapped. My words were calm, but inside my chest was a hurricane. I knew that beyond this door would lie the heart of the monster's domain, and perhaps the final children he had yet to claim. The operators on the other end acknowledged. In 8 minutes, lights would flash, battering rams would crash, and the world above would tumble into this hidden hell. But for now, in the hush before the storm, I stood at the threshold of an abyss drawn by human hands. I took a steadying breath, cast one last glance at Delgado and Jones, and nodded. On my mark. And as I reached for the door, I felt the hushed shiver of 1,000 whispered voices brush my mind, and I realized that by stepping forward, we were placing ourselves squarely in the jaws of a darkness that had waited 47 years to be discovered. By the time SWAT's battering ram shattered the final locked door at the end of the corridor, the house had fallen into a hush that felt organic, as if it were holding its breath. I kicked the debris aside and swept my flashlight down the narrow chamber beyond, a low-ceilinged room, walls slick with condensation and the heavy tang of earth. The single bulb overhead flickered twice before dying altogether, plunging us into pitch. I clicked on my flashlight and advanced, Delgado and Jones flanking me, rifles trained but lowered, every sense keyed to the quiet. The floor was uneven, packed to soil pocked with footprints, some adult, many small, leading toward a crude platform carved from the bedrock. On it lay plastic crates and overturned metal cots, reminiscent of the hidden alcove we'd first discovered under the crawlspace. A single folding chair faced the wall, its seat still damp. I passed it and halted where the platform met the wall. There, scribbled in charcoal across the stone, was the final message. "You think you're free, but you are mine." My heart thundered as I read the words, a last savage taunt. Behind me, Jones whispered, "He planned this. Every step, every hidden panel, to trap children and taunt the police in his private theater." I nodded, eyes scanning the dim outlines of the room. On the ground, I spotted movement, the rattling of an empty fish tank lid against a crate. I lifted it, and there, half hidden, was Evan's sneaker, identical to the one we'd seen upstairs. My throat caught. He'd carried it here, maybe to leave a breadcrumb. I rose and swept the beam to the far corner. A narrow hatch set flush with the floor. Its latch was rusted but intact. I knelt and pried it open, revealing a ladder descending into the black. "Sir," Delgado murmured, voice low. "It's another level." My glove brushed the metal rung. It was cold and damp. I glanced at Jones, whose expression mirrored mine. Dread hung in her eyes. Below us lay the deepest secret of this house, an underworld where our enemy had hidden both bodies and his own madness. I keyed my mic. "Bravo, team. This is 4 Bravo. Ladder descent ahead. Prepare for confined space rescue. Possible survivors below." The familiar crackle of acknowledgement came back, but even the reassuring chatter of radios felt distant. I caught Delgado's sleeve. "You first," I said. He shook his head. "After you." I exhaled and swung a leg over the hatch, sliding down rung by rung. The ladder ended at a rough stone floor, and the ceiling pressed low above me. The smell down here was worse, festered earth and old rot. I clicked my light upward. Delgado followed, and Jones illuminated the walls. Before us lay a network of tunnels narrow as mine shafts, carved into the bedrock beneath the house. The light reflected off wet stones, and everywhere we saw signs of life: crumpled blankets, empty bottles, scraps of clothing. And at the tunnel's end, a chamber 5 feet across. Inside, a small figure huddled against the wall. A child, pale and trembling, clutching a tattered doll. "Evan!" I whispered, heart hammering. The boy looked up, eyes wide with confusion and relief. I knelt beside him, pressing my flashlight to his face. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes but alive. As I gathered him into my arms, he pressed close and whispered in a quavering voice. I heard them, coming. Behind us, a low groan echoed through the tunnel, metal scraping on stone. We spun, lights swinging to the entrance. There, half emerged from the gloom, stood a figure in a drenched, hooded coat, face obscured. His eyes glowed with a mirthless light. "Too late," he rasped, voice echoing off the walls. "You can never leave." He stepped forward, and I felt the damp stone floor tremor under his weight. Jones raised her rifle, finger at the trigger, but her scope flickered as the man lifted one gloved hand. Inside the hood, I glimpsed the pale shadow of a child's photograph taped to his brow. He smiled, and in the beam of my flashlight I saw moisture, tears or rain, streaking his cheeks. "Welcome to my home," he said softly, "where every lost soul stays forever." I braced myself, pressing Evan closer. Sirens wailed through the tunnel as SWAT's breach team arrived behind us. The man's smile twisted, and he took a step back into the darkness. "I'll see you again," he promised, voice fading. "I'm part of this house like you are now." Before we could reach him, he vanished, slipping through a hidden passage behind a jagged rock wall, swallowed by the stone. The tunnel plunged into total black. Jones cursed under her breath. He's gone. Again. I lifted Evan, pressing a soft blanket around him, and we retraced our path up the ladder. As we climbed, the reality settled like ice. We had rescued one victim, but the architect of this nightmare remained at large, his network of tunnels and chambers still uncharted. Back in the foyer, the dawn light filtered weakly through shattered skylights. SWAT peeled back floorboards, and forensics dusted every hidden cavity. But my mind raced with the unanswered questions echoing through those walls. Who else had lived in his theater of terror? And where were they now?